Hey up, Chuck. That's Northern for hello. I think it is anyway. I don't really hang out with Northerners that much. There's only one I really hang out with now and again every few months, and I'm obligated to do so. You'll meet him in a moment. Welcome to the Strange and Deadly Show. Yes, your ears do not deceive you. Gentle listener, I love you. This is a podcast dedicated to the Section 3 list. I really love you. A cachet of films related to Britain's video nasties. I'm throwing in my love among the intro to spice it up a bit, because it's always a bit boring, isn't it? We pair up these films based on a theme, and then discuss and review them for your and hopefully our entertainment. You can subscribe to the show on iTunes, yes, or any good podcatcher, like Pocket Cast, for example. That's the one I use, highly recommended. You can find more information about us and the other shows we have available on our network over at gentlemansgrindhouserecords.com. It's a great website. You should go there immediately. We'll tell you how you can get feedback, comments and questions over to us at the end of the show. But don't worry about that for now. Stop it. Listen to this. Listen to me. Listen to my soothing voice. We're back. Can you believe it? Can you believe it? It's been about 3 years since the last episode. A long time. And I am, of course, I'm Chris Clayton. You know that already. I'm the yippy yappy one. Like a poodle. Really, if we were going to compare ourselves, the two hosts on this podcast, you're going to meet another one in just a moment. He was that Northerner I was talking about that I hang out with, the only one that I can tolerate. But yes, I'm a poodle, and I would imagine if I was going to compare the other host to a dog, I would say something like a Great Dane or a Shih Tzu. His name, of course, the other host, is Tom Elliott. Tom Elliott, how are you, you hunky fuck?
I'm very good, Chris. I'm very good. I'll tell you what, though, this zombie month's dragging on a bit, isn't it? It feels like forever.
It really does, doesn't it, Tom? It doesn't feel like it was only yesterday. It feels like it's been about 6 months.
Yeah, zombie 6 months.
It wasn't intended, was it, Tom?
No, it never is. But at the end of the day, we're back and we're ready to go again. Because we're nearly at the end. We've got, I think, maybe about 11 shows to go before that Section 3 list is done. So we're here and we're going to crack on with it.
Indeed. Based on our current track record, I would imagine we'll finish this podcast in about 2020, 2021, something like that. Yeah. So don't worry, the end is in sight. But it's look, guys, we're not going to bang on with excuses, and we're not going to make you promises and things like that. A lot's been happening in both of our lives. Mine, a lot of health stuff is going on, family issues that I've had to deal with in that regard. And I spoke about it a little bit on the podcast, on the Christmas special rather, which was a podcast as well. So I was kind of right. I don't know why I corrected myself. But it has delayed things, unfortunately. But look, hopefully, like I said, not going to make any promises. Hopefully we're back on the right sort of schedule and we can get this thing finished. It's only 11 or 12 episodes left, so there's really not a lot, Tom. We've done quite well, even though it's taken us much longer than we anticipated. We've done quite well to get to episode 30, I think.
We have, and I think, it's a body of work that I'm quite proud of, and once it's done, I'll be quite proud to look back on it and, say we completed that list. Good, bad, ugly, but we done it.
Yeah, I won't be that proud of it because you're on it. No, I'm just joking. How have you been, my friend? It's been so long since we spoke. Well, we have spoken privately, but certainly in a public forum. What have you been up to? What have you been doing?
Well, same old, really. Twilight Zone podcast is going from strength to strength. That's really sort of moving in a great direction. The listenership is through the roof. They getting a great response from the listeners, and I'm really enjoying doing it. So, you're really quite lucky to have me here, to be honest.
Yeah, all right. Don't, I didn't come back for this, mate. I didn't come back for you to gloat in my face, in my ugly, horrible face. We know that you've gotten all hunky and everything now, so you've got that against me, and now you've got an actual listenership, Tom. There's an actual listenership. Why can't we have a listenership?
Well, because we never put out any shows, probably.
That's a good point, isn't it? That's what consistency would help, wouldn't it? We're both big fans of the Now Playing podcast. I really enjoy that show. I've gotten into it massively over the past couple of months in particular. And their consistency, we were discussing it before we recorded, their consistency is just off the chain. and us not so much. The internet's least reliable podcast, that's us. But we'll get there someday, Tom. Someday we'll do something that's together that's worth being proud of.
No, we're both proud of this, and we're proud of our listenership, all 5 of them, and let's get on with this one. What are we talking about today?
I don't know. No, I've got the notes in front of me, Tom, and I can tell you we're continuing the zombie month, if you remember. All fitting in 2 shows in 4 weeks, Tom. Imagine that, eh? Imagine being able to do something like that. Well, we didn't quite manage it, but we're continuing, as we said, the zombie month. The previous episode we covered, what was it? Nightmare City, and I don't remember what the other film was.
Nightmare City and something about the dead. I can't remember either.
Definitely something about the dead, mate, but I don't remember what it was. But in any case, it's been a long time, folks. Forgive me. But on this episode, something of a director's special, I would say. We are covering 2 films from George Romero. 2 films that are covered on pretty much every horror podcast going. So it's not as if we picked these because we wanted to add to that particular conversation, because everybody covers these 2 films. They're classics, horror classics. We're covering them because they're on the Section 3 list, and just in case you forgot, that is, because it's been a while, that is what we cover on the show at this present time. We're going through the Section 3 list related to the video Nasties. I said it in the intro, but why not repeat it, Tom? Why not?
Why not? So,
exactly, why not? Should be the mantra of the day. Why not? Why not, Tom? Why not? I'll stop. So this is what we're doing. We're covering 2 classics. Like I said, not because we don't tend to. We're the sort of people. We've mentioned this on previous episodes. We're the sort of people, we don't really like to cover films that. We don't like to cover the well-trodden ground. We like to move into stuff that's maybe a little bit more obscure. But we had no real choice here. These are part of the Section 3 list, so we had to cover them. What are the films, Tom?
They are Night of the Living Dead and its sequel, Dawn of the Dead. And you're absolutely right. It's difficult. I mean, it's a funny one, really, because I think some people will probably look forward to us covering these 2 movies because everyone loves the Dead movies. But it's a tough one because, like you said, everyone's done it. And everyone, every horror podcast that starts up will probably do it. But that's the problem. What is left to say? And that's why we chose the Section 3 list, because it was so obscure. It came back to bite us in the arse a few times. But it was so obscure that we thought, great, it's stuff that not many people have really talked about. So let's do that. And that's nothing against shows that cover, the Dead series or, Friday the 13th, etc., etc. Great. And I love listening to that. But it's just not something sort of creatively for me as a podcaster that I really want to do. But like you said, it's on the list. So what can you do?
Mm-hmm. You're a bit of a film hipster, aren't you, mate? That's what it's all about. You don't want to cover the popular stuff. You don't want to cover that stroking your moustache, eh? Your beautiful, luxurious moustache going, no, I don't want to cover. I only want to talk about old art films from the 60s. I know your type. But no, it is true. It's true that we didn't want to cover. We don't really like covering stuff that's been covered by so many different people. And the Dead trilogy, I mean, I suppose people cover the whole series now. There's more than 3 films now, but particularly the Dead trilogy, Night, Dawn and Day, they're covered on so many different shows. We'll see what we can do to bring something to it. It won't be anything particularly new, because what new can you possibly say? There's nothing to really unearth there, but we're going to give it a go with Night of the Living Dead and Dawn of the Dead. And Romero, I mean, before we sort of get into this and discuss the films, how do you feel about George Romero, his body of work in general through the years?
He might be the very definition of someone who kind of had it, and I don't want to speak bad of the guy because I love him, as both a filmmaker and as a human being. But I said before on the show, and you kind of went, that he was at his best in a particular time, in a particular place. Pittsburgh, 70s, 80s, that was George Romero. And moving on from that. Not so successful, unfortunately, but I will never hold it against him because I have such goodwill towards the man. And, you know, he's getting on in years now, but I really would like to meet him. He's one of those people in the horror genre that I hope that one day I'll get to shake his hand.
He's definitely a character, isn't he? I mean, you look at him now and he's got a distinctive look. He's got those massive glasses that for some reason always make me laugh. I kind of want to nick him, to be honest with you. I want to nick him and run away from him. I know he's an elderly man. I don't want to endanger him in any way, but I want a big pair of glasses that I can sit on my face. I don't want George Romero to sit on my face. I just want the glasses, really. Let's talk.
That took a strange direction, didn't it?
Didn't it? But it is the Strange and Deadly Show, Tom, and that is what we do. I do agree with you. I mean, do you like films like Night Riders, Creep Show? You know, sort of anything outside of the Dead films?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Creep Show, in a lot of ways, it's his most commercial film of that time, I would imagine, and he makes a great success of it. It's like EC Comics on film, isn't it? And you know, Night Riders, it's been a long time since I watched Night Riders, so I can't quite remember it that well. But, you know, we talked about Martin before, and I like Martin, that kind of thing. So I do like stuff of his outside the Dead films. What about you?
Yeah, I mean, I think he's a bit of an underrated director. We did talk about Martin in the past, didn't we? That was also on the Section 3 list, if I remember rightly. We talked about that interesting film. I sort of liked it a bit better on a rewatch. And I know you had some issues with it. But Creep Show, I think, is the one for me, outside of the original Dead trilogy. I mean, what's your thoughts on Survival of the Dead? Shall we get to it later?
We'll get there.
We'll get there. I just wanted to tease you about it because I know in the past that many years ago we had an exchange about it and how you felt about it at the time. I just want to reiterate, by the way, I don't want George Romero to sit on my face. I want that to be known because I felt like I made a definitive statement there, and you know, I respect the man greatly. I wouldn't want to disrespect him by doing something like that. I'm going to tell you about Night of the Living Dead, Tom. Can I do that?
Please do.
Thank you. It was released in 1968, also known as Monster Flick, Night of Anubis, and Night of the Flesh Eaters. Those were all working titles for it. It was directed by George A. Romero. The A stands for awesome. Starring Dwayne Jones, Tom. Dwayne Jones is there. Judith O'Day, wonderful actress. Carl Hardman and Marilyn Eastman, among others. And let me read the synopsis to you right now. We open in rural Pennsylvania as we witness a car driving up to a graveyard. Inside the car is Barbara and Johnny, siblings who have made the journey in order to pay their respects at their father's grave. Johnny teases Barbara about the spooky graveyard as a mysterious, unresponsive man walks towards them. He savagely attacks Barbara, forcing Johnny to step in, who soon meets his end as Barbara runs away in a panic. With the vicious man in pursuit, Barbara escapes to a nearby farmhouse. Making her way inside, she runs up the steps only to discover the grisly sight of a corpse upstairs. As she makes a run outside, she encounters Ben, who helps fight off more of the men now gathering around them, and together they enter the house and begin securing the doors and windows. Ben quickly discovers that Barbara is traumatised by her experiences. She's largely catatonic, though does speak to him of the attack in the graveyard and asks him if they can venture out to recover Johnny. Ben explains that he's almost certainly dead. As Barbara disappears into her own mind, Ben makes a dash outside and sets fire to a chair. Fire seems to be warding off these people, which we come to know as ghouls, and provides some respite. Inside the house, Ben finds a gun and bullets, but he also discovers that he and Barbara are not alone. From down in the cellar emerges Harry, Cooper and Tom, two fellow survivors who have camped out down there, along with Tom's partner Judy and Harry's wife Helen. They've been nursing Harry and Helen's daughter Karen, who is injured. Ben and Harry quickly find themselves at odds, with Harry wanting them to secure the cellar door and remain there together with supplies, and Ben wishing for them to remain upstairs so they have a place to run if things get bad. Their arguments take a backseat for a while though, as they set up the TV and begin watching reports of what's been happening. These ghouls are beginning to become a widespread problem, with the reports indicating that they are, in fact, the dead who have come back to life. A plan is hatched by the group, minus Barbara, who continues to be catatonic, to make for a nearby truck, fill it up with petrol, and then escape to a nearby rescue station. Ben decides to take Tom with him to accomplish the task, and Judy, fearing for Tom's safety, decides to join them. There's now a growing horde of ghouls outside, with the numbers increasing and threatening to take over the house. Together they venture out to the pump, but things soon go awry when the gasoline spills onto the truck. Ben tries to help from outside as flames begin to spread towards the petrol pump nearby, and they try to get away, but the truck explodes, killing Tom and Judy instantly. Startled, Ben returns to the house, only to find that Harry is unwilling to open the door for him. He forces his way in and punches Harry repeatedly. The lights in the house then go out, plunging the remaining survivors into darkness. Harry makes a play for the gun and gets it, threatening Ben. The two fight again and Ben succeeds. He shoots Harry in the chest, who then stumbles into the cellar and dies next to his daughter. Meanwhile, Helen is almost dragged through the door, but Barbara finally musters up some courage and helps to fend the ghouls off. Helen runs down to the cellar and finds her daughter there, awake now, and a ghoul. She falls over and looks in horror as her daughter stabs her to death with a trowel. Barbara finally meets her end as the boards on the door finally give way. She spots a now dead Johnny among the group, who grabs her and pulls her away as the ghouls begin feasting on her. Only Ben is left alive now, and he seizes an opportunity to make it into the cellar as the ghouls flood into the house. Karen attempts to grab him, but he fends her off and makes for the cellar. The door holds strong, and he makes his way down only to discover the bodies of Harry and Helen. He shoots them both in the head, ensuring they stay down for good. Night fades into day, and Ben is awakened by the sound of gunfire outside and dogs prowling the area. A posse has arrived to help clear away the dead and rescue any survivors. Ben makes for the main floor of the house again and looks out of the window, hoping the posse notices him. And indeed they do, but seeing him from a distance they believe him to be a ghoul as well, and shoot him in the head before moving on as the film comes to a close.
Hold it! Don't shoot! We're from town. A radio.
County, Pennsylvania. The Butler County Sheriff has verified that reports of murder victims being partially eaten by their slayers is true. No further details available at this time. However,
How long you guys been down there? I could use some help up here.
That's the cellar. It's the safest place.
You mean you didn't hear the racket we were making up here?
How were we supposed to know what was going on? Could have been those things for all we knew.
That girl was screaming. Sure, you must know what a girl screaming sounds like. Those things don't make any noise. Anybody would know somebody ever needed help.
Look, it's kind of hard to hear what's going on from down there.
We thought we could hear screams, but for all we knew, that could have meant those things were in the house afterward.
And you wouldn't come up and help.
Well, if there were more of
The
them.
racket sounded like the place was being ripped apart. How were we supposed to know what was going on?
Now, wait a minute. You just got finished saying you couldn't hear from down there. Now you say it sounded like the place was being ripped apart. It would be nice if you get your story straight, man.
All right, now you tell me. I'm not going to take that kind of a chance when we got a safe place. We luck into a safe place, and you're telling us we got to risk our lives just because somebody might need help, huh?
Yeah, something like that.
All right, why don't we settle this?
Look, mister, we came up. Okay, we're here. Now I suggest we all go back downstairs before any of those things find out we're in here.
They can't get in here.
You got the whole place boarded up?
Yeah, most of it. All but a few spots upstairs. They won't be hard to fix.
You're insane. The cellar's the safest place.
I'm telling you, they can't get in here.
And I'm telling you, those things turned over our car. We were damn lucky to get away at all. Now you tell me those things can't get through this lousy pile of wood?
His wife and kids downstairs. The kid's hurt.
Well, I still think we're better off up here.
We could strengthen everything up, Mr. Cooper.
With all of us working, we could fix this place up in no time. We have everything we need up here.
We can take all that stuff downstairs with us. Man, you're really crazy, you know that? You got 1,000,000 windows up here. All these windows, you're gonna make them strong enough to keep these things out, huh?
I told you, those things don't have any strength. I smashed 3 of them and pushed another one out the door.
Did you hear me when I told you they turned over our car?
Oh, hell, any good 5 men can do that.
That's my point. Only there's not going to be 5 or even 10. There's going to be 20, 30, maybe 100 of those things. And as soon as they know we're here, this place is going to be crawling with them.
Now, I know from knowing you for quite a long time now, really, that you tend to like your horror to be quite visceral. I do as well, in fact. And I know that you don't tend to like films that are perhaps a bit tamer. I know you're not hugely into the old black and white horrors. What do you make of Night of the Living Dead?
this is probably not going to be that popular with the listeners. The thing is, you tell me this is an important film, and I absolutely agree. If someone says it's a great film, I'm not going to deny that it is. But unfortunately, I've just watched it too many times now that it's undeniably got so many great qualities about it, and you can't understate how important it is. Everything comes from this film. What we know about zombies now, there's, the ones that go a different way than what Romero set out in his template here, you could probably count on one hand, So it's incredibly influential, important, and there has been times in my life when I've loved it to death, but unfortunately, I've just seen it too many times, and to watch it now, it's quite difficult for me. And it's not a bad experience, don't get me wrong. If it's on in the background, to just look over at it is quite fine. But unfortunately, I seem to have sabotaged it for myself by watching it too many times. And I think if I woke up if I was asleep on the couch and I woke up at 2 a.m. and it was on, and I'm sort of watching it in a daze, half asleep, I would probably get more out of it again, because it has that kind of atmosphere to it, a sort of nightmarish quality with the black and white and these horrible ghouls and so on. So I think in the right time and place, maybe I would get something from it again. But unfortunately, and it's not even a criticism of the film, it's more just how I've watched it over the years, it just holds not much power for me anymore, and not really much enjoyment. And like I said, it's not painful to watch or anything like that. If you offered me the choice between watching this and Tom Savini's remake, I would probably choose Tom Savini's remake. I'm not saying it's better, but on a personal kind of level, I would probably enjoy it more. So there you go. Controversial, maybe. There you go. What can I say? What about you?
That's a bit of a downer, isn't it, Tom? You're starting from a negative place, and we're going down from there, I see. No, look, I completely understand where you're coming from. I think that familiarity can breed contempt. To some degree, I wouldn't even say that your opinion is one of contempt. It just is. It's a simple fact. You've seen the movie too many times. So have I, to be honest with you. And I struggle with it in a very similar way, in that I know all the beats, I know all the scenes, I know pretty much all the lines, to be honest with you. I know everything so very well that it's hard for, if I think of, for example, and we've covered this film in the past, Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I still find that to be, and perhaps because it's more visceral, I still find that to be quite effective. Even though I've seen it so many times, and in much the same way, I know everything that's going to happen. The fact that it's still there's a rawness to that, and there's still a power to it. I still feel myself affected by it to some degree. Even something like Cannibal Holocaust, to be honest with you, which is not a film I particularly enjoy watching. It's not a fun experience to watch it. There is a power to it and a feeling to it that I don't think I get from this. And it's just simply the fact that obviously it's the tamest of the 3 films in the original trilogy, the original Dead trilogy. Groundbreaking in so many different ways. I mean, look, the fact is, you and I are both, I believe, watched The Walking Dead, for example. It's probably the most popular zombie property at this point in time. Millions and millions and millions of people are watching that. A lot of people who are casuals as well. So in fact, I would wager that the biggest chunk of the audience who watches The Walking Dead are people who are not particularly into horror. And so you look at that. And you look at the fact that a lot of those people don't even know where all of this came from. And the fact is, The Walking Dead wouldn't exist without Night of the Living Dead. It just wouldn't. The amount of zombie games I've played over the years, Dead Rising and games like that, even Resident Evil, which is a convoluted mess of a thing. And I'm not talking about the films. I'm talking about the games. The films are their own convoluted mess. None of that would exist without this. It's an astonishing thing when you think about it, because there were zombies before Night of the Living Dead, the Caribbean zombies, But this was Romero reinventing a movie monster and defining it for decades and decades and decades and different generations to come. It has to be respected as a movie. I think it's made very well. The acting's a bit ropey in it, isn't it? I mean, it's certainly, there's a couple of characters here who really, really get on my nerves. We begin the film with Barbara and Johnny. Now, Johnny, I don't mind that. I mean, he's a bit of a tit, isn't he, really? But he's gone. He's gone relatively quickly. But early on, when I first saw this, I mean, I was very young when I first saw it. I had the impression that our main character was going to be Barbara, and of course, she's set up to be that in many ways. Is it just me, or is Barbara incredibly irritating? I mean, she becomes very useless very, very early on, and never ever escapes from that. Irritating character?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, just going back to the beginning, strangely, the beginning section is probably, I do still watch that part with the music and those long shots of the car driving along and those cemetery scenes, and it does fill me with a lot of nostalgia and a lot of love for, probably the only section in the film that does in a lot of ways, because it's just quite iconic in its own way. And you're right, Johnny is a bit of a tit. Does he wear driving gloves?
I think so, yeah. Anyone who wears those is a bit of a tit, aren't they?
Exactly. Who needs to wear driving gloves when you're just driving from one place to another? You're not a fucking racing driver, for God's sake. But yeah, I do like that sort of opening section as a piece of film. But you're right, Barbara just turns into a sort of vegetable. But yeah, Ben gets annoyed with it even a couple of times, and I can't blame him. So very, very annoying character. And we'll probably speak about the remake briefly, but I think the remake is an apology for this version of Barbara.
Absolutely, yeah. The remake is a direct response to that. And, to the audience response to Barbara. I think that, I mean, I don't know for sure, but I would imagine, I always got the impression that Romero saw that Judith O'Dea was not a particularly good actor fairly early on, and so just made her shut up for the rest of the movie. That's kind of what I like to believe, because a really irritating character. Fortunately, I think a lot of this is carried by Dwayne, who plays Ben, who I think is a strong character, is a black male who was quite. I mean, it wasn't common to have a black man as a lead in a horror movie at that point in time, and I have always loved and admired the fact that they make nothing of that at all. There's no reference to that whatsoever, because it's unimportant, really. He's just a strong character, and I think Dwayne is it's a decent actor. He didn't really go on to do very much at all, but I think certainly early on, because we know that we've lost Barbara, we need somebody who's strong, who can glue this all together.
That's right. He is very good, and I do like that aspect to it as well. It's similar to something that Rod Serling did in The Twilight Zone. Funnily enough, I'm not plugging the Twilight Zone podcast. It's okay, Chris.
Right.
But
it seems like it. It seems like you brought this back just to prop that up, and it's fine. It's fine. Don't worry about it. I'm not mad about it.
But he made an episode of The Twilight Zone with a completely black cast, and at that time it was, very unheard of. But he didn't make a big deal out of it. He didn't make it about it. It was just, well, here's a story, and the cast is black, and that's what George Romero does here, which sometimes is, in its own way, quite a powerful thing to do, because you're not getting on your soapbox. You're just saying, well, why shouldn't I cast a black actor here? You know what I mean? He was the best man for the job, which is what George Romero said. He was the best man for the job, so why shouldn't I do it? Which is absolutely right and great. It takes on some sort of subtext later on at the end of the film, especially. And Romero always says that, it's not meant. He just cast a best man for the job, but I don't think, and we'll get there, but I don't think you can do that with a black man in this part without it taking on some kind of subtext, you know?
I find it, I'm not saying I don't believe Romero, but I can understand why it would be viewed that way. Most certainly. But certainly it makes, casting Dwayne in that role makes a statement, even if it wasn't intended, makes a statement for that time period. And is a strong character that I think if we were left with Barbara in this house alone, this Barbara, to just sort of wander around and scream and look a bit dazed and confused and a bit shocked. And look, I understand that the process that people go through, shock and trauma, I understand that it can affect people in different ways, and that is what's being portrayed here, but it doesn't make for a particularly good character. She doesn't actually do anything really. There's only one or two moments where she steps up a little bit. But yeah, I find her to be, the more I see it, the less I like her, which is, not a sign of a great character. But we do get, we get some strong personalities here, certainly. When Harry comes in, of course, Ben and Barbara are, trying to, or it's mostly Ben, to be honest, trying to fortify the house, board up the windows and the doors to make them secure so that the ghouls, as they're known in this film, they weren't referred to as zombies here, can't get in. And of course, even now you're seeing something that becomes an archetype much later on. The people being holed up in one location, having to fight for their lives, having to board up everything. I mean, it's been done so many times. It was done in The Evil Dead, basically, many years ago, even though that's not zombies in that movie, but it takes the same principle and the idea. All these little ideas are being planted, these influences that would take on strength later on by different filmmakers embracing those influences. It's very interesting. But anyway, so Ben is fortifying this place, and down in the cellar there have been this other group of people down there who, I never really bought the idea that they didn't hear what was going on upstairs. And hear it clearly, because there's a point where a bunch of them are down in the cellar and you can hear quite clearly someone shouting from upstairs. So I never really bought that they wouldn't have heard Ben shouting at Barbara and her explaining what was going on and everything. The excuse that they make in the film is you've got Harry there who comes up, and Tom, they make the excuse that, well, we didn't know, we thought it was the ghouls who had come in and were making a racket. I don't know if I ever really bought that.
No, I think that's just Harry's bullshit, isn't it? Because that suits him to say it, but he's the one who kind of brings in some level of conflict, because Ben's the kind of leader, if you will. Harry comes in and brings that conflict that's needed to kind of say, well, if people would just get along, we could defeat these zombies, which is the whole thing throughout, isn't it? Throughout all of Romero's zombie movies, if people would just get their shit together, then we could probably defeat them and come to some sort of plan that would save everyone, whatever kind of thing. So he is the guy who starts it all. He's the one who brings that conflict, and I enjoy it. I enjoy his character. He's not a very likable character, but I do enjoy what he brings to it. I hate to say it, but I enjoy him more in the remake because he's a bit gruffer. I can't remember the actor, but he's very good as well. But he's where it all begins. If only we could just get along.
I know. I mean, there's always a jerk off in the group, isn't there? There's always one. I mean, we're going to see it in Dawn of the Dead with Stephen a little bit. There's always somebody who's the divisive character who's, he's always got to put a spanner in the works. And really, if you think about it, if you analyse it, if Harry was more cooperative, they might have survived through the night. But it's the fact that he disrupts things to that degree that in the end it all sort of topples around them. Of course, the way this is going to go. If you've seen Night of the Living Dead, and I would imagine almost everybody who's been listening to this has done so. But so we get this standoff really between Ben and Harry, and we get Tom and Judy. These are two sort of milquetoast characters, really, aren't they? They don't really add a tremendous amount. They're friendly people, and they understand that what Ben is trying to do, which is because I mean, how do you feel about the argument that Ben and Harry have? What side do you take there in terms of where they would have been better off? Because my personal view is, and I would imagine it's probably yours as well, but you can tell me, is that you want as much free space as you can possibly get, and you want an exit. You want somewhere that you can go to where you can back off to and you can try and make an escape. Whereas if you go down into a cellar, you hold yourself up in there, you might be okay for a while because the door's fairly strong or whatever. But if they manage to get in, you've got nowhere to escape to. Where do you fall on which side do you fall?
Well, this is the thing, isn't it? And it's interesting because maybe Harry was right. Maybe if they'd have went in there and barricaded that door, make that the strongest point, the strongest point that they couldn't get through, then maybe they would have survived. So I think the point is they needed to be having that conversation in this way. Like, so what do you know what I mean? In a very calm, considered manner where they were both considering each other's point of view. So the point of the thing is that they had this conversation by shouting at each other. Where do I sit? I agree that you would need it as a fallback position. If all else fails, let's get down there, but let's try and secure the house. If it comes to it that we have to go down the cellar, well, let's get something in place where that point of entry, the door, is going to be the strongest thing ever that we can come up with. And if we have to go down there, then we'll barricade it. And then maybe the next day when people come, they would have all been in the cellar and we wouldn't have had that ending. But yeah, so I'm kind of with Ben on this one. But they just needed to have a much more reasonable conversation about it.
Yeah, they need to have a chat, Tom. There's no need to fight.
No.
We fight too much as well, don't we? We fight too much. We argue too much. And there's no reason for it. Let's be calm. Let's be reasonable people. And let's work out how to take this podcast forward in the right way. Let's figure it all out, Tom.
It's too late for that.
No, it is, isn't it? It's crumbling around us, Tom, much like the events of this movie. I mean, the ironic thing is, of course, that Ben ends up down there at the end of the movie anyway, and that is, in fact, the best place for him to be. But I do tend to think I wouldn't want to be, I wouldn't want to be in a place where I had nowhere to go. At all. If somebody was breaking in and was going to attack me, I would want at least a chance to be able to get away. But in any case, they're sitting there and they're watching TV, and of course they see the reports that are coming in. Now, I don't quite remember, because I don't remember every little facet, every little detail, but I think this is the only film in the Dead trilogy where we get an idea of what might have caused this to happen, why the dead may be coming back to life. And that is in the form of an explanation from someone there, a reporter, who says that scientists have said that there is a satellite that is carrying mass amounts of radiation. Could that have been the cause? As far as I'm aware, that's the only time that Romero ever gave us a clue, really, as to what might have been causing this to happen in the first place.
Yeah, from Venus, wasn't it? I think
something like
it was
that.
Bringing radiation from Venus or something along those lines. I can't remember whether they refer to it in Dawn at the moment, but it's an odd one, isn't it? That radiation from space, it puts it more into the realms of science fiction than horror then. Because these days, I think zombie movies, it's more like it's something that came out of a lab or some sort of disease or something. So the fact that this one came from space is very strange, especially when you put it with because Night of the Living Dead, it's in black and white. It has that very big music, doesn't it? From sort of more classic horror movies from earlier. I think it's very much on that line between the old and the new, because it is the movie that ushers in that new era of horror, but it's still got some of the trappings of the old era, and the music is one of them, so it's very... So it's interesting that he's gone with a more sci-fi thing than, someone's opened a tomb or something, and there's a dead guy, something, I don't know. But the thing with the Dead movies is it's not about the explanation, is it? It's about what happens next.
Yeah.
So I guess that's the thing.
Well, do you think there needs to be a reason? For you to enjoy a zombie movie, do you have to know why it's happening? Why the dead have come back to life? Because for me, it's never been a thing. I've never needed to know, in the same way that I didn't need to know why Michael Myers was Michael Myers. I just needed to know, I knew enough from the first Halloween movie, for example, to know why I needed to be scared of him. Do we need a reason, an explanation as to why this is happening?
It's quite unique, isn't it, in film, that we don't need an explanation for something. And I don't think we do, but it seems to be this film that makes it that way, if you know what I mean. It's this film that says, no, you don't really need an explanation. Just look at what happens next. And then it carries on in the sequel and another sequel and so on. Countless zombie movies since have followed in those footsteps. So it seems with the zombie movie, they're all kind of riding on the back of the fact that we don't have an explanation and we don't need one.
Yeah, I mean, Shaun of the Dead's one of my favourite zombie movies. Of course, it's a comedy as well, but there's no explanation of what's going on there at all, and we don't care. You know, I just find that really interesting that it's one of those things where there are certain genres, there are certain kinds of movies where if we don't have an explanation as to what's happening, we feel confused, we feel unsatisfied. Yeah. In a zombie movie, all we really care about is we know what the conflict is, and the conflict is between the dead and the living. That's all we need. Very, very interesting. In any case, we push on with the plot here, and things start to get going really when the group hatches that plan to go to the truck, to get the truck, fill it up with petrol, and they'll all try and escape. Because the daughter of Harry and Helen, I think her name is Karen, is injured, has been bitten, and needs medical help. And so they postulate this idea. Let's try and get to the truck. Things don't go very well, do they, Tom? When they get to the truck, things, as they transpire, gasoline does not mix well with a petrol pump. You don't want to put that and fire near a petrol pump. It's not going to turn out well for you. It's
not, no. I think the remake, they do something as stupid as they do in this one as well, don't they? They're just very...
I don't remember that. What did they do in the remake?
I think in the remake, there's a lock on the petrol pump, and he shoots it off. So,
right, okay.
And that's the end of that. So I guess they're continuing the tradition that these just aren't very bright people.
Yeah, and of course Tom and Judy meet their end. I mean, you know, it's not a great death. I mean, it's a quick death, at least. And what was interesting is we hear, of course, on the news reports that the dead are eating the flesh of the living, or, you know, killing people and then eating their flesh. And we finally see it here. This is the first time we see it. Tom and Judy are dead. Their burned out bodies are in the car, and the zombies come in and they start taking pieces of their body away, their flesh, limbs and things, and having a good old chew, Tom. As we've said before in the past, we've covered zombie movies. They have a good old chew, don't they? Have a good old chew on some meat.
Yes, that's right. But I suppose at the time it would have been considered quite grisly, wouldn't it? You know, they're having a good old chew on some human meat. But
yeah, I don't know if you know this, Tom, but this is actually true. Often on a Sunday roast, my parents back in the day, they were actually, I say back in the day, it's happened as recently as last year. They'll make a Sunday roast, like cook a beef joint or something. Not a joint, actually, something that's bony, Tom, something that's bony, and they'll carve almost all of the meat off of it, but they'll leave a little bit of the meat, because there's some bits you just can't carve off.
Of course.
You just can't get it off there, Tom. You can't get it off there. And they'll leave the bone there for me, and I'll tackle it like a dog or like a zombie. So, you know, I sympathise with the zombie people, Tom. I understand them. But you're absolutely right. Imagine how that must have been back in the 60s to see something so grisly. You know, I mean, of course, by that point they'd seen something like Psycho, but this was gore, effectively. You know, Psycho is fairly bloodless for the most part, apart from the shower scene. But this is gore, what would have amounted to gore in the 60s, certainly. So, mind you, I'm saying that, but of course you had people like Herschel Gordon Lewis, for example, who was making incredibly gory movies at that time. So I guess it was certainly not anywhere near that level. So we see Tom and Judy, they're dead. They're gone, Tom, out of the film. Goodbye. So Ben is out there. He manages to fight his way back to the house. And here we see the pettiness, the cowardliness of Harry, who does not want to let him into the house. Ben manages to force his way in, kicks the door open, and he gives Harry a good old punch, doesn't he? And more than one. There's a couple there that, you know, it's almost its version on They Live territory, Tom, if you remember that film, where they do it, Rowdy Roddy, they just have a big old fight that goes on for ages. Not so much here, but Harry deserved a good punch, didn't he, at this point?
Well, I think it's a frustration of the whole situation coming to a point, isn't it? You know what I mean? He probably could have just pushed him over, but he's like, you fucker. And he just knocks the shit out of him. So, you know, it's the frustration of the whole thing coming to a head rather than just him overreacting, I think.
Yeah, I mean, look, Ben's a strong character. He's not going to take any shit.
No.
You know, at no point does he kowtow to Harry at all. You know, he's not scared of him. If anything, Harry towards the end seems to be more scared of Ben. So we're moving towards the end here now. Two characters have gone. The lights go off in the house. Boom, there they go. And of course, you plunge into darkness. Now, Harry and Ben have a bit of a fight because Harry wants to make a play for the gun and he manages to get it. Ben fights him. And really, there's no forgiveness there at all. He shoots Harry. Boom. Done. You know, he's ready to take him out. Helen, of course, doesn't seem particularly bothered about that. I know she's being attacked by zombies from behind. They're sort of trying to get through the door that she's leaning up against, and there's boards and things there, but they're still trying to make a grab for her. But I get the feeling that Helen doesn't really give a shit. I get the feeling that Helen has lived with Harry for a very long time, and she even says early on in the film, you know, you don't have to like living with me or something like that. And it's like, okay, this is not a happy couple. It would be very difficult to be happy with somebody like Harry, I would imagine. But Barbara comes to the rescue. Barbara actually does something. Tom. She actually rises to the occasion and manages to fight the zombies off. And Helen gets away, goes down into the basement and meets Karen, who is... Now, when I was a lot younger, I always used to think that Karen was the same girl who was on the poster art for the film.
Oh, right.
But I can't remember now, because it's been so many years since I've really sat and listened to information about these movies. I can't remember if she is supposed to represent Karen, or if that is just supposed to be a random, you know, zombie/ghoul on the poster art.
You know, I'm sitting looking at the poster now. I can't remember which artwork you're talking about, so I don't know, because the poster I'm looking at has actually got characters from the film in it, but it's probably not the same one, so I don't know. I'm not too sure. Okay,
I mean, the thing is, there have been so many releases of the film because it's in the public domain, which we'll talk about in a moment, that it's possible that I'm seeing something you're not there. But in any case, Karen stabs her mother to death quite brutally, actually. I mean, this is cut down in a few of the UK releases where she stabs her mother 13, 14 times. I mean, it's brutal.
Yeah.
Every stab is felt, and communicated. And in some of the UK cuts, they've cut it down to about 2 or 3 to try and sort of lessen the impact of it. But when you see it uncut, I mean, I feel the impact of it, and we see sort of Helen's terror and pain. There's a painful feeling to it, imagining what she's going through, being stabbed to death by her own kin.
Yeah, I mean, any misgivings I have about, and they're not really misgivings, it's more the familiarity, like I said. But the ending, this ending sequence that they come into, you can't argue with the greatness of it. This especially, the child killing the parent, because it sets up that dilemma that everyone has in every zombie movie. Could you defend yourself against a loved one who had turned, especially if it's your own child, So very powerful stuff, because I don't think there's many zombie movies that probably do it as well, because I think it's something that you really could play up. This is your child. Could you defend yourself against them? Could you dismember them in order to save your own life? That kind of thing. So it's quite an interesting thing.
I mean, if it was you, I could do it. I think. I'd baseball bat to the face. But you're quite a chunky bloke, so I'd give you one hit and then I would run, and I'd hope that you would be dead. But if you weren't, I'm already out the door. The problem is that I do resemble a jelly, and so that could be problematic. I mean, I could be at the top of the stairs and you could be giving chase, and because you're quite a bit fitter than me, as we know, you're fitter than most people, Tom. You could reach me fairly quickly and I could be down quickly, and I'd regret it. I would regret it, because, I would have been hoping that just that one hit would have taken you out. But because it didn't, now I'm regretting it, because I'm probably going to die. And nobody wants that.
Well, the thing is, you'd probably do it as well while I was just sitting watching telly or something, and I hadn't been bitten by a zombie. There's probably no zombies about, but you'd do it just in case, even though
Definitely.
there's actually no threat there. So I'd be watching telly, having a cup of tea, and next minute I'd have that baseball bat to the face. But you're right.
Yep.
You better do it right the first time.
Do you know what, mate? You annoy the fuck out of me sometimes with particularly with your PlayStation 4, your lack of concentration when it comes to games, Tom. You're flitting around all over the bloody place. You're playing Batman Arkham Knight 1 minute. You're playing GTA 5 the next minute. What? Why? Why do you have to be this way? Why do you have to make me want to cause you damage because you don't do things the way I do them?
Right. So, what's this got to do with Night of the Living Dead?
It's not about Night of the Living Dead, Tom. It's about the vendetta I have against you for being different to me and better looking and more popular. And I want to be that way, and I can't be, so I have to take out my anger on you. I apologise. Shall we go back to we'll go back to the review. We'll go back to the review.
Yeah.
And we'll just say no more about it. But I would like it if you just gave me some attention sometimes. I feel like I have to share you with so many people, and it just is. It's difficult for me, Tom. I'm a possessive man.
Right. Okay. So Night of the Living Dead. We're pretty much at the end now, aren't we?
Good film. Good film. And yeah, so we're almost at the end of the movie. The only person left alive is Ben. You know, Helen's been killed. Harry, gone. So Ben goes downstairs into the cellar. The ironic thing that I was talking about before is that he takes ends up taking the plan that Harry had in the beginning and, fortifies the door there, locks himself in, and manages to survive the night. And you're thinking at this point, if it's the first time you've seen the movie, Ben is actually he's going to be the one who makes it. One of the things I think is really effective about this movie is that it has quite a powerful twist at the end. And we can also link this into what you were saying about Ben being a black man. Mm-hmm. And even though this wasn't the intention, the character comes up to the main floor of the house, looks out the window. There's a posse out there of people who are clearing out the dead, who are shooting them in the head and moving on. And they see him in the window. I remember being quite shocked about this when the first time I saw it, when I was quite a bit younger. And they see him in the window, and it's an odd thing because they don't call out to him or anything like that. They just see him, and they mistake him for a ghoul/zombie, and they shoot him in the head dead. And so nobody has survived the night. All of the characters that we came to know over the past 90 minutes or so, gone. Each one of them dead. Like we said, Romero didn't intend for this to happen. But is there some subtext here? The rednecks have turned... it's a rural area. The rednecks have turned up in a posse, gun-toting rednecks, and they see a black man in the window, and they automatically assume that this is somebody who needs to die. They don't make any effort at all to make any sort of contact with him. What are we reading into that?
Probably more intelligent people than me can make a whole lot of stuff about this, because it's really there, I guess. If it had been a white man, would they have been so quick to shoot? Mm-hmm. And, things still happen today in the news where there are stories where people believe that people have been prejudged by people in authority because of their race, that kind of thing. And I suppose there's that, but there's probably many more layers to this that other people can see, kind of thing. But what about you? What do you think?
Well, back in the day, whenever I had a question of this magnitude, really, I would always ask Jeeves because he was on the television saying, "Come and ask me." So I would type in there, for example, what's a vagina? And he would tell me about it because I was curious about it. And he would say, well, a vagina is this. And I would go, great, how do I get inside that? And he would answer again. He always had an answer for something, Jeeves did. But I didn't get a chance to ask him this specific question, Tom. So I don't think we'll ever know. And that's okay. It's all right to not know things, Tom. It's all right to be, on the lower echelon of people. Because I'm there. And come on down. It's a nice place to be. It's simple. You get a dessert every day after dinner, and it's a nice, it's sweet as well. and you get a tucked in at night, sung stories, told stories as well, but sometimes they are sung to you. It's a nice life. It's a nice life. Come down with me. Did you ask Jeeves about it?
I didn't, but I didn't type in why did they shoot Ben into Jeeves, and I wish I had.
Right.
But
you should have done.
I should have done. But
have you goggled it?
No, but it sounds nice. Maybe ignorance is bliss, and we can just move on from this and say there's subtext there. We're not going to discuss what it is, but it's there.
Yeah, I'll tell you what though, mate. Jeeves, he knew a lot of information. And where's he gone?
Does he not exist anymore?
Where's Jeeves gone? No, Jeeves is gone, mate. With all those search engines. Once Goggle came along, mate, that was the end of it. Bloody Goggle came along, and with their billions and billions of pounds and their PewDiePies and all that shit, and they shot Jeeves in the head, Tom, and killed him.
Well, there's the
dead.
There's the subtext, right there.
I'll tell you what, mate. Once we're done with the Strange and Deadly show, I think we should dedicate a 30-episode series to the history and current location of Jeeves.
Yes, let's do that. So, there's Night of the Living Dead. Is there anything else to say about it? Because considering we didn't want to talk about the film, not that we didn't want to talk about it, but we thought we would find it difficult. We've went on for a fair old while. So, anything else about this one?
Look, it's a classic. We both are fans of it. Like you say, having seen it so many times, I think the appeal of it, and I suppose the impact of it, is diluted somewhat. I can imagine, I mean, would it cross over to current generations? Would a youngster now going back and visiting this, visiting it for the first time, would they get the impact of it? I don't know. I don't know if it's quite visceral enough. Like you say, there are elements of classic horror to it that remain there, that are sort of shaken off by the time you get to Dawn of the Dead, where that very much feels like it's part of, it has almost elements of exploitation and gritty 70s cinema. This, not as much. I think it's a classic film. I think it deserves to be. It's so influential. Is it a film that I go back and revisit every year? No, I feel like I've kind of seen it enough. Now, like you said, if it's on TV or something, I might catch it then. But it is, I can't deny its power and its impact over the years. It's incredibly influential. And like I say, the zombie shows that we watch, the zombie games that we play, the zombie comics that we read, none of that really would have been possible without Romero. And I think that has to be respected.
Yeah, definitely. And I don't think there's anything wrong in saying it is powerful, influential, etc., and I've taken that from it, but I'm going to move on now because, I think to go back to it as some sort of, let's say I wanted a rewatch of the Dead films, would I just sit through it, even though it doesn't really work for me as much anymore? I think it'd be more damaging. So sometimes maybe we should just let things sit and, let our memories of it be the thing we remember rather than actually watching it again and not having the same impact. So there you go.
All right, mate. Well, stick it up your chuff. Now, let me tell you about the releases. I don't know why I'm laughing. You shouldn't be laughing at me. My own joke's stupid. Right, so let me tell you about how you can get this film, Tom, because, well, it's famously in the public domain due to a copyright mistake that was made back in the 60s, which I'm sure Romero is incredibly grateful for, having earned hardly any money out of the film since he made it. That's got to sting, hasn't it? That's really got to sting. You made the most influential zombie movie of all time, and you barely earned a penny out of it. That can't feel good. But there have been a multitude of different releases, many of which are very poor quality. Now, on the Blu-ray side of things, the most well-regarded release of the film as it stands currently is actually from Japan. It was released by Happynet. Now, this release, this is the one that I've got, and I imported it, I think it was sometime last year, has fantastic picture quality. It's probably the best-looking version of the film you're going to see on the Blu-ray format. It's slightly cropped, but is overall the best HD release of the film, and it's fully uncut as well, so you're getting the full film there. Nothing's been cut out of it. Now, I imported it from CD Japan, which is a place where you can get Japanese releases fairly easily. They take a little while to come in, but it cost me about 16-17 quid to get it, including postage, and it is region free. If you're going to get the film on Blu-ray, that is the one to get, I can assure you. And if you look on the various Blu-ray forums and different review sites and everything, that is the one that is regarded as the Blu-ray release to get. Until we get something that's super duper definitive, that is what you're going to get. And it really does. I've had a quick test of it, and it really does look very, very, very good. There are also UK Blu-ray releases of the film from Studio Canal and Network, both of which are considered fairly subpar. I think the Network one, I can't remember which one it was. One of those has a decent picture quality to it, but it is cut. I think it's the Network release, has several scenes of gore removed. On the DVD side of things, the most well-regarded release is the very famous Elite Millennium Edition, which remains one of the most faithful-looking versions of the film. I remember getting that many, many years ago for fairly cheap, and I've still got it somewhere. This edition is long out of print now, and it may be difficult to acquire for a decent price. I think it fetches a hefty amount if you can get one. You'll want to stay away from the 30th anniversary version of the film. This includes new footage shot by John Russo, who also worked on the original film in the 90s. This version changes much about the original film and inserts the new footage liberally into it. Have you seen that version of the film, Tom?
Many years ago. I can't really remember it, but I've got no desire to go back to it.
Oh, it's fucking woeful. And there have been all sorts of different sort of tinkerings of it, 3D versions, colorized versions of it. You know, because it's public domain, people have really messed around with it. But certainly, if you're going to be going for a modern, current HD release of it, have a look at that Japanese release from Happynet. Pop onto CD Japan, and I think you'll be quite grateful for it. That is the end of Night of the Living Dead, Tom. Now, it's time for you to speak and to tell us about the second film in our double bill. What is it?
Okay, Dawn of the Dead, released in 1978, also known as Zombie, of course directed by George A. Romero. Starring Galen Ross, Ken Foray, Scott H. Reiniger and David Emge, among others. There's chaos at WGON TV station where reporter Francine is trying to make sense of the world's events. The country is now flooded with the undead, reanimated people who have come back to life. Although the government is trying to suppress the threat, there are now simply too many to deal with. A televised debate is raging about how to deal with these zombies, what they want and what to do with the bodies once the brain has been destroyed. Francine's boyfriend and fellow reporter Stephen, realizing that the situation is desperate, comes to Francine with a plan in mind. Tonight, they'll escape in Stephen's helicopter, along with Roger, Stephen's SWAT team friend, and the search for a safer location in which to reside. Meanwhile, Roger is about to raid an apartment building with his teammates, which has been overrun with the dead, but also vigilante residents who don't want the SWAT team to come in. A fight ensues and some of the SWAT members die as Roger makes his way in. It's a scene of death and destruction inside, with the living dead occupying some of the rooms. One of Roger's teammates commits suicide, unable to deal with the pressure of the overwhelming odds stacked against him. Roger runs off to a nearby laundry room and encounters Peter, someone from another SWAT unit. The two converse before they're invited into the basement area by a preacher. They discover many zombies in a room, dumped and writhing on the floor. Peter and Roger shoot them all in the head. The duo finally meet up with Francine and Stephen and take off in a helicopter. They land to refuel and encounter resistance from zombies in the area, with Peter being attacked by two undead children. He shoots them dead, a look of shock upon his face. Stephen, who comes to gain the nickname Flyboy on account of him being the one to fly the helicopter, proves himself a lousy shot, unable to save Peter. Luckily, Roger steps in to take the undead down, saving the life of his new friend. Having refueled, the group return to the helicopter and eventually happen upon a shopping mall. They enter in through the roof and find that the mall is full of zombies, but reason that they can prosper here with the amount of food and supplies available. Stephen seems to disagree with their methods, with clear tension between he and Peter. Regardless, Roger and Peter venture out into the mall to enter one of the shops. Keeping the zombies at bay is difficult due to their sheer number, but the pair manage it. With access to food and drink, the group realise they could be safe here. They gather some supplies and listen to the radio, hearing the government reports. During a conversation, Stephen reveals that Francine is 3 or 4 months pregnant. Peter asks if he wants to abort the baby, but the idea is refused. The supply runs continue, with Francine being told to stay behind until she can handle herself. She asks Stephen if he can teach her how to fly the helicopter just in case anything happens to him, which he eventually does. Roger and Peter hatch a plan to keep the number of zombies entering the building much lower by using some trucks outside to form a blockade. The plan works, but Roger is bitten on the arm and leg in the process due to carelessness. He progressively gets sicker over the coming months until he dies, reanimating as an undead. Peter kills him before he can do any harm. Though the group is down by 1 member, they continue to survive. The emergency TV and radio broadcasts eventually stop, seemingly indicating that the country has been largely taken over by the dead, and that no military or government help is available anymore. Things come to a conclusion when a biker gang rides into the mall, driving through the doors and allowing zombies to pour in en masse. Peter suggests they leave the bikers to do what they came to do, which is salvage and raid, but Stephen attacks them. A gunfight ensues, and Stephen, who tries to make an escape in the elevator, is cornered and bitten by zombies. Peter manages to kill some of the bikers, and some are killed by the zombies, forcing the rest to retreat. In reanimated form, Stephen leads the zombies into a secret area upstairs that the group have been living in. Peter realizes that they can no longer stay up here. He tells Francine to leave through the roof and to take the helicopter and go. He wants to stay and die. As Francine fires up the helicopter, Peter has a change of heart and he manages to force his way up into the roof. He enters the helicopter alongside Francine, and the two fly off into an unknown future as the world crumbles around them.
I would have made you all coffee and breakfast, but I don't have my pots and pans.
Also, wait a minute, there's another report here.
May I say something?
Sure.
So in areas of the north and west.
Sorry you found out I'm pregnant, because I don't want to be treated any differently than you treat each other.
Oh, hey, Frank, come on.
And I'm not going to be den mother for you guys. And I want to know what's going on, and I want to have something to say about the plans. There's 4 of us, okay?
Jesus, Fran. Fair enough.
Okay, now what's going on?
We're going out, and you're not coming with us. And you won't come with us until you learn how to handle yourself.
Something else. I don't know about you two, but I want to learn how to fly that helicopter. If anything happens to you, we have to be able to fly out of here.
She's right, man. Come on, let's go.
And I don't want you to leave me without a gun again. I just might be able to figure out how to use it. I'm sorry, Stephen.
It's all right. It's all right.
Stephen?
Yeah?
So Chris, Dawn of the Dead, what do you think of this one?
It's quite exhausting, isn't it, doing a podcast? You'll find out why at the end of the show, folks. After the ending credits. Dawn of the Dead, again, massively influential. We see so much of it now in the modern zombie properties. Again, we see a lot of it in The Walking Dead. This is much more my cup of tea. Compared to Night of the Living Dead, it's much more visceral. It's flawed. There are problems in it. My tummy's rumbling. I don't know if you can hear that on the mic. It is one of my favourite horror movies of all time. Now, here's where we get into something that you were saying last time. Now, I still love the power of this movie. I still find it very entertaining to watch, but I have seen it a lot. And again, we go back to that the thing of the impact of it has been diluted for me, but then that's also my fault because I've seen it so many times, and there was a time when I was watching it 2 or 3 times a year in my life, and so and watching different cuts of it and things like that. And we're going to get into the different versions of it that are available later on. But there's no denying that the power of it is there. The influence is there. It's much more... I think it's much more in our wheelhouse. The two of us tend to like our horror to be much more visceral and violent and bloody, and this definitely suits it. Flawed film, cheese-tastic in a lot of ways, which I wasn't prepared to see when I was a kid, because I knew I had read about the importance of the film, and I wanted to believe that there could be nothing wrong with it at all. And there are problems, and we'll get to it, but makeup effects and things like that. We'll talk about that. But as a general overview, I still think it's a great movie. I still think it's one of the 5 out of 5, best horror movies ever made. I think its influence is widespread. What about you?
You're absolutely right. I am extremely familiar with it. I can virtually recite it line for line, so it's not quite as much of a problem as it is with Night of the Living Dead. I can still watch this. I just need to choose my moments, really, set aside some time and just kind of sit back and watch it, because otherwise I can be quite distracted, and because I know every beat of it, I could just be going and doing something else rather than watching it. But if I set aside that time and say I'm watching Dawn of the Dead, then I can still sit and watch it and take the time with it that it needs, because for me it's all about time. It's all about that time. What are you going to do? You barricaded yourself into this mall. What are you going to do? So I think it's great in that way. And you're right, it's a bit more in my wheelhouse. I have a bit more appreciation of it. It's a classic, and I love it a bit.
Yeah, Tom's a hamster wheelhouse, you see. So, but most definitely. And I'm much fonder of the characters in this. I'm much fonder of the location they're in. I love the mall. The location of the mall, I think, is just, what a fantastic idea. Something that hadn't been done before. And of course, Romero is, he's putting in the allusions to consumerism and the idea that so many Americans spend so much of their lives in the mall, shopping and we do so, and to be honest, we do so much of it even now. It's still a point that I think this is one of the reasons why Dawn of the Dead still resonates for a lot of people, is that we're still doing that even now. We're still living so much of our lives in shopping malls and shopping centres, out and about. They make a point of referencing that even in the movie itself, saying that, well, this is instinct. This was the reason the zombies are here, is because this is a place that meant something to them. So they're running on instinct. That's why they're here. That's why they flooded out this shopping mall. I think it's effective from the very beginning, because we're immediately thrown into panic. At the TV station, they're in a panic. They don't know what to do about this developing situation. We've got a debate that's happening there between a member of the government there, a scientist, I suppose, and the presenter of the program, and they're arguing about it, and they're debating the point: what do we do about this? Why are they doing the things they do? What's going to be the effective method of somehow overcoming this giant threat? And what we know is that there's the idea of escalation. If we're choosing to believe that this takes place in the same universe as Night of the Living Dead, then we know that what's transpired since that movie is that the zombie threat is much, much, much greater than it was before. That this is not a threat that's been stamped out. The redneck posse that turns up at the end of Night of the Living Dead, yeah, they're going around and they seem to be doing a pretty good job of cleaning up the dead, but what we learn here is that actually, no, this is now widespread, and much of America has become this. And I really enjoy that. I really enjoy in the theatrical cut, which is the main cut that most people have seen, that feeling of panic that you're in this TV station with Francine, played by Galen Ross, and you're immediately thinking, wow, all of these people are in flux, because where do you go? What do you do? How long can you keep going for? I really enjoy that aspect of it. I think right from the beginning, it sets out its stall to be a much more intense movie, at this point anyway.
Yeah, because it's interesting, at the end of Night of the Living Dead, you could think that actually they've solved this, or not solved it, but they've contained it, because they have all these groups of people with guns sort of wiping out the zombies, but all it takes is one area or a few areas all over the place where the zombies actually take hold. And this is what's happened. And ultimately, those guys with guns then become less effective. And that's what we've got here, where they're actually just doing their best to keep their heads above water rather than really containing everything. So you're right, it really is great to show that, you know, even the cops with the sense of duty that they have are like, well, actually, it's time to go, you know?
Yeah, it's time to go somewhere. And where do you go? You know, there are people talking, you know, later on there's a conversation with some of the cops. And this is sort of fleshed out in the extended quote-unquote director's cut, which we'll talk about. They meet some cops there who say, well, they're gonna go to an island, you know, and they don't really know what island they're going to go to, but they're just going to go there. People are trying to get somewhere. And the idea is brought up here by Stephen, who is Francine's boyfriend, that he's going to steal the work helicopter and they're going to make an escape. And they've got a friend involved, this guy named Roger, who's part of the SWAT team. And that's when we then move over to the apartments. And we see the SWAT team performing that raid and going in. And here's where we begin to see our first taste of the new zombies in Romero's world and the makeup effects. So at this point, they're very primitive in Night of the Living Dead. For me, when I look at the makeup effects in this film and the blood in particular, to me it's quite transitional. I think it's they're not quite there, are they?
No.
But they're feeling it out and they're trying to get it right. And I remember Savini talking about the blood formula they used for the film. They hadn't really settled on. I mean, if you look at a lot of 70s horror movies, the blood is not done well. It's super bright and paintish. And it was a while before they really perfected the blood formula to where it would look more realistic and it was darker and not so here. And, you know, especially when you watch the film in HD now, some of the appliances that they use, the practical effects, they look quite foamy and as if they're biting a piece of foam away from a body, which is probably what they're doing, to be honest. The prosthetics are not great. The makeup itself it's a bit weird, isn't it? I mean, it's not some of my favourite makeup effects for zombies, Day of the Dead, the original, and I really love the zombies, the way the zombies look in Lucio Fulci's Zombie, or Zombie 2, as you may know. Here, it's not great, is it?
I think if you had Day of the Dead level zombies in Dawn of the Dead, you would probably have, your ultimate zombie movie, wouldn't you? Because you're right, it is great. It was Savini who done this, wasn't it? The effects. And he obviously wasn't at the height of his powers for whatever reason. I don't know. Maybe he was still sort of learning his trade, or maybe it was budget. I really don't know. But I think if you had those Day of the Dead level effects, and we'll touch upon that very briefly later on, then you would probably have had your ultimate zombie movie here. But it's interesting that, I mean, this was made 10 years later than Night of the Living Dead, and Romero has never really focused on time as such throughout this, He's never really given a definitive timeline. So it could have been, a couple of weeks after Night of the Living Dead. So everyone's still a bit fresh, They're going a bit off colour, but they're still a bit fresh. So I'm okay with it that they're not the best zombies in the world, you know what I mean? It's like, yeah, they've not long died, so they're just a bit off colour.
I mean, that's fair enough. I mean, I think, but you can't forget what you know. I think that's the problem when you go back and watch it, having seen Day of the Dead, where the effects, the quality of the effects are just, they're at such a high level that it's, you go back and look at this and you're like, oh dear, this looks a bit ropey, doesn't it? But for the time, still very interesting and definitely a much gorier movie all round than still not, again, to the Day of the Dead of, when Day of the Dead gets into it really gets into it in terms of gore. This not even quite as much as that, but definitely a nastier film than the Night of the Living Dead. And it's one thing I've always liked about Romero, is that there is that, again, that escalation of ideas, the making it darker and nastier. And this is very much the case. But there's a rollicking feel to this movie, I think. Once we get into the mall, we get out of that apartment building, and then Roger and Peter meet each other. They manage to make their way to the helicopter. And once we get into the mall, there's a real sort of adventurous feeling to a lot of it, partly down to the music. Now, of course, we haven't mentioned it yet. Everybody knows the score for this movie, Goblin, which is, of course, the fantastic Italian prog rock band who've done soundtracks for so many films that we love, particularly Suspiria. Is my personal favourite, but they did a great score for this. Now, Romero uses some of it, he doesn't use all of it, and he uses a lot of public library music, and that music is very different to the Goblin stuff. The Goblin stuff is sort of ominous and interesting. The public library stuff is quite playful and jolly, and so I think that gives it a rollicking feel that neither film before or after it has. You know, Day of the Dead is a very dark movie and quite melancholic, I think, in a lot of ways. This has got a feeling at times of adventure to it, I think.
Yeah, I remember watching an interview with Romero once where he described it as a romp. And it is a romp, isn't it? Because it kind of puts us in their shoes of, okay, the world's gone to hell. Where would you want to be? You would want to be where things are most plentiful, but there's also an element of wish fulfillment. You know, you want to be somewhere where you can do stuff that you've always wanted to do. You've always wanted to go to the mall and just take whatever you want, you know, and there's that element to it as well. So it is a romp, and it does work on that level, which I think is where, you know, a lot of this consumerism kind of stuff comes into it too.
Well, I like the fact that, you know, Romero doesn't hide the fact that all of these people, these survivors that we've come to know, they are quite consumerist themselves. You know, they go in there, and there is that immediate thing of he never forgets to show them as being human, of liking the fact that actually we're in a shopping mall, and yeah, life kind of sucks outside of it and inside it as well, because there are plenty of zombies roaming around in there. But as long as we're safe and we're careful, we can kind of make a pretty good life out of this, and we can run around and we can have a bit of fun, and we can sort of, and they start having fun with the zombies, you know. In fact, there's even a scene before they even get to the mall where it just, and now this isn't in the Argento cut. Again, we will compare these cuts a little bit later, but this isn't in the Argento cut as far as I remember. Maybe you can tell me if I'm wrong, but there's a scene, quite a playful scene, where there's just a bunch of rednecks outside and they're just shooting zombies and they're kind of making a game out of it. Is that in the Argento cut?
I can't remember. The cuts are sort of merging in my head.
I wouldn't have thought it would be, because one of the things that sort of stands out about the Dario Argento cut of this movie is that he cuts out almost all of the humour, which is, you know, not a great surprise for him. Although he's been having a laugh for about 20 years now, making a load of old bollocks, hasn't he? Yeah, it's so we see rednecks, and there's sort of a playful ditty as they make a game out of shooting zombies and drinking beer and stuff like that. So there's a lot of humour in this film.
Yeah, that is still there. Just for the listeners, this time round I watched the Argento cut just out of curiosity, and there is that sort of playful sequence there with the rednecks shooting the zombies, but it's interesting how Argento used the music, because he uses Goblin's music a lot more than Romero did, and it shapes a lot of scenes very differently. You can't argue with the impact as to what's a better cut. You know, we'll talk about that later on, but it's certainly impactful the way Argento frames some of these scenes.
Yeah, I mean, we'll talk about the Argento cut at the end here, but let's sort of focus on our characters for a minute. We've got four main characters here. We've got the SWAT team members, Roger and Peter. We've also got Francine and Stephen. Now, Stephen is, you know, I compared him to Harry a little bit. He's not really like him at all, but he is the divisive character. He's the one who causes tension in the group, and there's a lot of very specific, powerful, cold tension between him and Francine, and it becomes more and more apparent as the film goes on. What do you think of Stephen, and especially the dynamic of Francine and Stephen together?
Well, the thing with Stephen is he's not so much your man's man. And then these two sort of SWAT team cops come along, you know, obviously very capable, kind of burly guys. And when they come along, Stephen gets kind of seduced by their bravado. And it's not really, bravado is probably the wrong word, their skill and their talent. And because they go and they do their business kind of thing, and they're very good at it. And you can tell in that initial sequence when they're clearing the mall, yeah, they start to have a bit of a good time with it, but he's very seduced by their skill, and he's clearly not as talented as them. So that affects his relationship with Francine, because he doesn't want to be with her anymore. He wants to be with the boys. Not so much that he doesn't want to be with her totally, but it starts to affect them because, don't say these things in front of the guys, that kind of thing. He clearly starts to re-examine that relationship, because he's a bit of an arse, basically. He wants to run around with the boys, but he's not really one of them.
That's an interesting point. I mean, I also have to ask you, because you mentioned there that it seems like he doesn't particularly want to be in the relationship anymore, but I get the feeling that she also is re-examining the relationship. Do you think that she, because when I was watching it this time, not that I haven't seen this before, but I really get the feeling that she's becoming very cold and very distant towards him, and seems to be falling out of love with him, seems to be seeing, now that she's in a sort of close proximity to him, they're in a desperate situation, seems to be seeing qualities in him that she doesn't like. And I notice as the film moves on, she drifts further and further away from him.
I think it's all part and parcel of the same thing, that had they just went somewhere together, just the two of them, they might have been okay. But because these two guys turn up, Peter and Roger, and Stephen is quite seduced by this macho kind of roughy-tufty lifestyle, and he starts to feel a bit held back by Francine. On her side, it's a bit like, well, is this all it takes to sort of diminish our relationship, that you're so you're so seduced by Peter and Roger, and Peter and Roger in themselves are nice guys. It's not like they're trying to pull Stephen away. They're just doing their thing. They're doing what they do. Mm-hmm. So Francine kind of, I think, sees Stephen as just like, you're just a bit of an arse, aren't you? That really speaking, you should be, fine, have a bit of a run around with Peter and Roger, but she's his partner, and he should be sort of working with her to protect themselves, but he just wants to run around with the boys.
Yeah, and do you get the feeling that there is a bit of an unspoken attraction between her and Peter?
It's funny you should say that, actually. Yeah, possibly, and maybe Stephen is a bit fearful of that as well. Maybe he noticed it too, so you might be right there. Yeah,
I always got that impression that there was a little bit of, well, Peter is sort of, he could be a more capable man, more capable of looking after me, because I've got to have a baby. If she even makes it that far, to be honest with you, we never know. But I've got to have this baby, and Stephen's a bit wet, isn't he, really? Yeah. I don't know if he's going to be, is this somebody who can actually protect me? I mean, we see earlier in the film, the guy can't even make an accurate shot. Roger has to step in and take the shot for him in order to save Peter's life. So I always found it quite interesting. I always find Stephen an interesting character, because I don't think he's a bad guy.
No.
I don't think he's a bad guy. I just think he's a flawed guy, and is doing nothing to really step up.
Yeah, that's exactly right. He's just easily led. If he'd just done his own thing and done what he was supposed to do, then there wouldn't be any issues, kind of thing. But he's just a bit seduced by the whole thing. But, later on, Roger sort of falls prey to being seduced by the situation as well. When they kind of decide to barricade the mall in. And again, it's a bit of a romp, but he sort of loses sight of who he is, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, totally loses sort of focus, really, and comes to pay for it. I've quite enjoyed up until this point the Roger and Peter dynamic, where they become fast friends and they work together really, really well, and it's a good duo. And what we see is that, of course, Roger kind of loses his mind a little bit, really, when they're out using the trucks to try and barricade the entrance. And Roger pays for it by being bitten on the leg and on the arm, and he's sort of put out of commission, really. And now we're in a situation where the only other quote unquote capable man is, well, Stephen. which is an unusual situation to be in, because I get the feeling that Peter and Stephen don't particularly see eye to eye on anything, and now they have to work together. So he has to sort of step up there. And I was always quite sad, really, to lose Roger in the end. I always thought that he was a strong character, worked well with Peter, and I was always sad when he was bitten, and we knew that, of course, his time was to end quite early.
Yeah, he just lost his head a bit, didn't he? And, he had actually been quite level-headed and, like you say, worked well with Peter throughout. But I think whereas Stephen was seduced by being with Peter and Roger was kind of seduced by the we can have whatever we want thing that had happened as a result of getting them all, They could run around, take what they wanted, and he'd been seduced by that. So that was his sort of vice, if you like, the mall, and he wanted to protect it to such a degree, which Stephen did as well. It's only really Peter and Francine who have some sort of perspective on this whole thing.
Yeah, I mean, they're, when you get down to it, there's, I suppose, the strongest characters, really. Even though Francine, I think, doesn't really step up that much herself. It's certainly not a strong character like the lead you're going to get in Day of the Dead, where you get a very strong character, very strong female lead there. Galen Ross, not so much, unfortunately. But yeah, so we Roger is down, and then we sort of move into the second half of the movie, really, where we see the three people. Roger stays alive for a while, but of course, if you're bitten, you're going to turn eventually. He does turn, and Peter has to kill him. Stays in the room, in fact, waits until he wakes up and then shoots him in the head. And then we have our three remaining survivors here. We have Peter, Stephen, and Francine, and we get to see a little scene of Stephen and Francine having dinner, having a dinner date, and that doesn't go very well, does it, Tom? It doesn't. The poor bugger, Stephen, he gives her an engagement ring, and she's like, nope, we can't do this. And there's that feeling there that the two of them are kind of done, really, that there's not going to be any real future to that relationship, because they simply don't know if they have a future or not. Things sort of heat up again when we get to the biker gang coming in, led by Mr. Tom Savini, who fancies himself an actor in quite a few things, doesn't he? I don't quite know if there's ever a time where I've seen him as a character. I've always just thought, oh, look, that's Tom Savini pretending to be somebody else for a bit. But he comes in as part of the biker gang, and here's where Stephen makes quite a big mistake, really, which is it's a difficult situation from the beginning, because the biker gang comes in, they're going to be raiding. Peter has the idea that maybe they can just sort of hold themselves up somewhere, wait for them to take what they want and then go, because there are so many of them. Of course, they outnumber them, but they come in, and Stephen decides to attack them, and not a good idea, Tom.
It's not, and here's the sort of fallout from that whole thing between, Stephen getting seduced by the relationship with Peter and Roger, and now Roger's out the equation. He's the one who needs to try and step up and take the Roger role, because Peter and Roger, with Roger in his right frame of mind, might have been able to, although they were outnumbered, they were better trained. They might have been able to plan this more and work together to come to a better conclusion. But now Peter's just got Stephen, who is quite inept. He goes off on, things that he shouldn't go off on, that kind of thing. So this is the fallout of the whole thing now. Had it been the three of them together, even though Stephen was a bit of a liability, maybe they would have got through it. But with Roger gone, then they haven't got a chance.
Yeah, and we get some great pieces of music during a lot of these scenes. We get the boo. There's some bongos in there as well, which I'm a fan of. And we get some fantastic pieces of music in. I really do love the Goblin score in this, and I wish more of it. To be honest with you, I wish more of it was in the theatrical cut. I enjoy the library music. It fits in with some of the wackiness that's in Romero's cut, but I do wish more of the Goblin score was in there, because it's really great, and it really adds, I think, to a lot of the tension. Maybe it doesn't quite give the Romero version the feel that he wanted, but so much of it is good. And yeah, we get to see the firefight between our survivors here and the biker gang. Eventually they take a lot of losses. We get what surely must be the Savini special, which is a machete in the head. He whacks a machete into a zombie's head, and of course he does it himself, which tells me that was his effect that he was particularly proud of. And eventually, the biker gang gets sort of chased away, really, because they lose so many of their numbers. But Stephen, he doesn't have a nice end, does he, really? I mean, he goes into an elevator, tries to escape, and gets cornered by zombies, and he gets sort of bitten and tries to fight them all off and manages to do so, but he's quite badly injured. And the next time we see Stephen, he has turned.
Yeah, and he makes a decent zombie, doesn't he?
Very good. Very, very good indeed. And now this is the interesting thing, is that he has some sort of trace memory, because you would think the zombies, well, they're fairly brainless, aren't they? But he has a trace memory of where the group was hiding. And so he goes upstairs and manages to find them, and he brings the rest of the zombies with him. And including the Dalai Lama, of course, is there. He's there with them, and comes on in and is shot in the head by Peter relatively quickly. He doesn't get to do a lot, but I thought that was interesting, really, the idea. And of course, Romero's going to play with this, with these ideas again in Day of the Dead and Land of the Dead. The idea that zombies can remember things of their old lives, and he hadn't died, he'd only died a little while earlier. But an interesting thing that he remembered that, even though he is this thing now, this monster, if you like, has remembered where they used to hide and has brought them up there as a sort of a kind of a last minute bit of revenge, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, all the way through the film, it's all about people coming back to the mall, a place they remember, a place that was important to them. And this was the last most important place to him as well, so that's where he goes. And you're right, Romero plays with this again and again, and I do like how he plays with it throughout. I mean, sometimes better than others, but we'll get there briefly in a moment. But yeah, this is the end of the film, and it all goes to hell. And in the end, we're just left with Peter and Francine making their escape, and a bit of rousing music while they sort of climb up there and jump on the helicopter kind of thing. And Peter has his moment of hesitation. So maybe one of the less dour endings to a Romero Dead movie, because someone gets away. So yeah, it's quite unique in that respect.
But there's always that feeling that, well, how much fuel do they have?
Yeah.
How much fuel do they have? Where can they go? Because we sort of said it in the synopsis there, but the emergency broadcasts have stopped. So as far as they're aware, there might not be anybody else alive. Well, obviously they know the biker gangs, but the military, the government, there might not be anybody out there really, or very few of them anyway. As we find out in Day of the Dead, there's only really pockets of them littered around the place. Much of society has been destroyed, has been turned. Now, of course, the original ending of Dawn of the Dead was much darker and involves France. Basically, they both decide, Francine and Peter both decide to commit suicide. And if I remember rightly, Peter shoots himself, and Francine, in a kind of an odd thing to do, I suppose, really. I don't know why you just wouldn't take a bullet, but she decides to turn the helicopter on and decapitate herself with the whirring blades of the helicopter. And they decided, in the end, Romero was like, nope, I don't want to do that, and they ended up changing the ending. They didn't shoot that, but they did do a test for it, because there's a behind the scenes picture of it where they were doing a test with a decapitated head and everything. So it was interesting. It could have been a much darker movie. I'm glad we got the ending that we got.
Yeah,
because it gives you hope, And again, it's we keep going to it, but Day of the Dead has a similarly hopeful ending where you think maybe there's a possibility. I mean, who knows what they're really going to do from here? But at least somebody survived for a bit,
Yeah, there's a chance.
Indeed. A bit of ABBA there, Tom. Take a chance on me. So that's it. That's Dawn of the Dead. I think a very powerful movie. I think one of the best horror movies ever made. Like we said, the impact of it is diluted a little bit because I've seen it so many times, but I can't deny what's there. It's a great movie, and normally you'd say, well, if you haven't seen it, you should check it out. Normally you think that everybody who's listening to this would have, but I know for a fact that Andrew Roberts, who's going to leave some feedback for us in a minute, had not seen it up until watching it for this show. So that's a kind of an incredible thing, and it still seems to have a good impact. It still seems to cross over generationally. Yeah, I think it's a fantastic piece of work, man.
I love Dawn of the Dead, but I just need to, like I said before, set aside that time, sit and watch it, and soak it up again. Let it do its work, you know what I mean? And when the time is right, I still get a real kick out of it. So I've got no complaints about it.
Mm-hmm. It's a great movie. And let me give you some information about the different releases of the movie that are available, and then we'll talk perhaps just a little bit about the different cuts, and then we'll move on to maybe discussing very briefly, because we're running pretty long. It's your fault, Tom, really. And you'll find out why I say that at the end of the show. Although I have rambled a lot, but that's what I always do. We'll talk a bit about some of the other Dead films in the series. The most well-regarded UK Blu-ray release of Dawn of the Dead is the one from Arrow Video, which I actually just sold the other day on eBay. This was a limited edition release that is now out of print and difficult to find for cheap. The general consensus on the transfer contained in this release is that they're not great, but that the extras and packaging make the release worth buying. There's also a Japanese Blu-ray box set that costs around £100, which can be imported from CD Japan and other places. The newest Blu-ray release is one that I had my eye on, and I sort of changed my mind after what I'm about to tell you. It's a 4K box set from Italy, which has the original cut in 4K, and then the original and other cuts in 1080p as well. Now, there's also a version of this set without the 4K disc, which is cheaper. This set is unfortunately plagued with issues, according to several Blu-ray forums. I always make a point of, if there's a sort of a classic movie that's coming out, I always make a point of checking the forums out to see if there are any, people who really know what they're looking for. Can sort of check them out and see whether it's worth investing in. And apparently it has grain issues that pop up in different places randomly, so it's not as if it's a grain that's throughout the movie. It's just sort of there as an error. There's cropping problems, and the encoding quality is considered subpar for that. So if you were thinking of getting the Italian box set, the general consensus it seems to be that Dawn of the Dead has not had a great HD release yet. Certainly the Arrow Video, if you can score it, is worth getting, but they haven't quite nailed that definitive release yet. The newest, for DVD lovers out there, Arrow's old DVD release of the film is still available. You can also find the film as part of the Trilogy of the Dead box set. You've got an Anchor Bay DVD, haven't you, Tom?
Yeah.
As well, which is...
I think it still really holds up, the Anchor Bay one. It's got the three most famous cuts on it, and still a very nice release. I think it holds up.
Yeah, is that the Ultimate Collection one that came in the big box? Or is this a different one?
Well, it comes in a dark box with the famous Dawn of the Dead zombie face in red on the front.
That's the one.
But the box is completely black.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's the one I'm talking about. I've got that as well on DVD somewhere. That's a great box set. I did have a look at Amazon in America, and it fetches about $150 there. So,
all right, I'm going to sell it.
It might cost you. Yeah, so well, there you go. We know what you're like, Tom. If you love a film, it's got to go on eBay. That's why I sold my Arrow Video one, not because I wanted to get rid of the film, really, because I'd need the money. So yeah, there's the Trilogy of the Dead box set, which is actually the first time that I ever owned all three films together. Unfortunately, that's got the 30th anniversary edition of Night of the Living Dead in it, which is woeful. But that's another way to see it. But hopefully they'll release a definitive. Hopefully Arrow will revisit it at some point and do a proper 4K restoration of it. I mean, they seem to be doing that with a bunch of their stuff, going back, and they did that with Deep Red, for example. So there's always a possibility of that. But the film is out there if you want to see it, folks. Now let's just quickly run through. Now, of course, normally when horror podcasts cover these films, they do the original trilogy, and sometimes if you got something like, I can't remember if Ancient Slumber has done this or not. That's Chris Ward and Myron Schmidt's podcast. I don't know if they've done the entire Dead series. They probably have. I don't listen to that song. I've got no time for that. No, I'm just joking. I just can't remember. Of course, we're only covering these two films because they're on the Section 3 list. But I felt it was right that we quickly run through the rest of the films, not covering them in any extensive way. But let's move on to Day of the Dead, which followed Dawn. Now, I often have an internal debate as to which of the two I prefer, Day or Dawn. It does change. I have to say, the more that I go back and revisit Day, some people find it a bit boring, the movie, because it's a slower paced movie. But I think Day is my favourite. I think it's my favourite. I mean, what say you?
That's music to my ears, because I think when you first watch it, it's the more difficult film to like. You kind of have to work at it. But once you do, and you let it do its thing, because there's some performances in there that I find quite annoying, some of the soldiers and so on. But there's some that are also really great in it, and Tom Savini is at the top of his game with the effects. And I think when you're so familiar with the trilogy as it was, and you watch Night and Dawn because they're so easy to watch, and then you come to a point where you think, I need something different from this, so you revisit Day again and you go back to it, and I think that's what happened with me. And when I kept going back to it, I found a lot more to like in it, and it's my favourite too. Day is my favourite of these three.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned dour when talking about the way that Dawn could have ended, and I think there's a dour quality to this, but I think it really works. It's the darkest of the three. But it plays with some really interesting ideas. Bub the Zombie. You got Captain Rhodes in there, who is one of the most over the top performances I've ever seen. But a standout in the same. I mean, ridiculous, but a standout nonetheless. Strong female characters, strong characters in general, and you talked about Savini's effects. K&B, of course, involved with this under his tutelage. Delivered some great work there, and of course we're seeing that now. Greg Nicotero worked on this film, who now does directs episodes of The Walking Dead, does a lot of the effects for The Walking Dead as well. A lot was started here, and I really feel like of these three films in the trilogy, this is the one that holds up the best.
Yeah,
I think. But like I say, not the easiest watch compared to the other two. So we move on. It took many years. Romero had a hard time really financing other movies. Has always had that problem, because every time he wants to present a different idea to somebody, these days they just say, well, can you make another Dead film, please? And he goes, okay, and makes one. And we have Land of the Dead, which came out in 2004, maybe, somewhere around there.
Was it then?
I think so, somewhere around there.
Yeah.
Certainly the early noughties. And, I've always had a little bit of a soft spot for Land of the Dead. We're getting diminishing returns now, as we're going to see, going from the original trilogy, which is a high watermark there. We then come to the lesser films in the series. But what do you think of Land of the Dead?
I like it. I like it. I think it needed a stronger lead. I mean, the guy, I can't remember his name. He went on to be in The Mentalist, where he's all about personality, but in Land of the Dead, he's like a blank slate. He's got no personality. But it's interesting. Romero with a bit of a budget doing the thing. It's not perfect, but I kind of like it.
Yeah, and it's got Asia Argento in it, and it's an odd film. The beginning of the Romero CGI, and we're going to see more and more of it cropping up, and it's a big bone of contention for me personally. I really can't stand the fact that Romero embraced CG, because the CG that he uses on the budgets that he's got, I think, looks terrible. We see a lot more of that in Diary of the Dead, which is the next film that followed. What's your take on Diary?
The unfortunate thing is, I think Land of the Dead was supposed to be Romero's big comeback, but it didn't really perform as hoped. It was like other zombie movies had come out, and then he did this, and it was supposed to be, okay, you've done this, but now Romero's back. But it didn't really perform. So next time he came back, it was with a much less budget, and he'd done Diary of the Dead. The sad thing is, I've watched it once and never watched it again. I should go back to it, but I don't even own it, and I'm the kind of guy who will buy a shit movie just to complete my series, you know what I mean?
Oh, we know about you, mate, with your bloody Wolverine oranges. Oranges? Wolverine oranges, yeah. Wolverine oranges, X-Men apples.
Yeah.
No, we know about you, mate, and your, what was that? What was the one you put? Ghost Rider. That's it. Ghost Rider, Spirit of Vengeance, you silly man. But yeah, it's one of those things, isn't it? Yeah, I mean, I sold it quite a long time ago, and Land of the Dead. And that, and it makes me sad. I mean, somebody said on the internet forum many years ago, they said, well, it's not great, is it? But it's still better than most because it's Romero. And it's like, well, no, a bad movie is a bad movie, isn't it? It doesn't matter who made it. If it's a bad movie, it's a bad movie. I don't think Diary of the Dead is terrible.
No.
It's got an Amish character in it who I think is quite funny, and is not in it for very. And I believe he's mute, and I remember that being a standout. But there's one scene. There's a death scene in it where a woman takes a defibrillator. I think it's a woman or somebody takes a defibrillator and puts the 2 pads on the side of a zombie's head, and the effect is the most obvious CG. And I remember sitting there watching that and thinking, yeah, this is everything I want to see has been diluted. When you consider Day of the Dead, technology should be that we can make great practical effects now if we wanted to. Of course, they use CG to save time and money or whatever, blah. To see the effects in Day of the Dead being better than the ones in Diary of the Dead, to me, that's a real step down. But we finish off perhaps the last film in the Dead series. We don't know. Certainly been a while since it came out. Survival of the Dead. Now, remember you and I had a discussion about this movie quite a number of years ago, and I remember you telling me that you really thought this was the lowest point it could possibly get to, and I remember telling you that I thought it was the worst one, but I didn't think it was a tremendous step down from where Diary of the Dead was, which was already fairly bad. How do you feel about Survival now?
Well, it's hard to say because I just never went back to it. I remember watching it and I was still quite excited to get it because I thought, okay, maybe Diary was a bit of a misstep and he'll pick it up again with this one, but I just remember it being so much worse. The zombie riding a horse. There's a female soldier just sitting in the middle of the street masturbating, and it's like, are you just trying to be edgy here, but you don't really know how to be edgy? It just seemed ridiculous to me. But like I said, it's been years since I watched it. I watched it when it first came back out, and I've never been back to it since. So, I'd be quite interested to see it again, to see whether my opinion's changed.
Do you reckon he'll make another one?
The sad thing is, whereas it used to be that he'd try and make a movie and people would say, George, we'll give you the money, but only to make another zombie movie. Now, I don't think people will give him the money to make another zombie movie. That's a situation that unfortunately in, but... Now
listen, Tom, shut up for a minute, because we've got loads and loads and loads of feedback to get through, and it's a very long show, Tom. So we hope you enjoyed our reviews and our little recap of the films in the Dead series, directed by Mr. George A. Romero. The A stands for ooh. Why don't we, Tom, sit down? I am already sitting, actually, come to think of it. But if you were standing, sit down now. And why don't we listen to some feedback?
Hello there, chaps. It's been a long time, but we're really all glad to have you both back in our lives. So anyway, I'll start with Night of the Living Dead. There's not really much I can say about this film that hasn't been said already. It's a classic in every way, and the origin of every zombie fare that's come afterwards, and still have today. Although the acting is a bit raw, it feels 10 times better than the majority of most exploitation films, and the black and white really helps to draw out the nightmarish quality to the plot. While it is the first zombie film, it's interesting that the zombies actually feel part of the background, and the main threat is actually like their unwilling cooperation with each other. Even though I'm an adult now, the first time I saw Helen Cooper's death scene, the screaming sounds scared the crap out of me, and it still gives me goosebumps to this day. The ending still packs a punch to your gut. As a kid, I hadn't seen anything where the heroes didn't win. Ben's death in particular still hauntingly resonates with modern-day issues in America. A few interesting tidbits about the film. It was originally called Night of the Flesh Eaters until the name had to be changed, and when it was changed, Image 10 forgot to place a new copyright over the opening titles, and that's resulted in the film being in public domain even today. John Rousseau, who plays one of the zombies, also made a very inferior special edition version in the early 2000s, which is a must-miss if you've not seen it already. Anyway, on to Dawn of the Dead. As a horror fan, I have to apologise for only just seeing this now, specifically for the show. Even after seeing all the imitations that flooded afterwards, this is clearly the one that they were all trying to emulate, and it certainly delivers in every way. The gore is incredible, very comic booky, and very well balanced with the overall human aspect of the story. One of the funny things is, I was talking to my other half as we were watching this, and we discussed what we'd do if we got into a shopping centre, and then lo and behold, the characters in this movie did almost the exact same thing. So clearly, Romero had thought about it realistically, and it shows that there's a great deal more thought in this than usual. I thought Fran's character was quite good. She was certainly less screamy than I thought she'd be, but there are some moments where she just kind of does nothing when she or her friends are in danger. When Stephen becomes reanimated, I remember thinking, oh god, he's going to remember where they lived. I mean, it was very well executed. In true Romero style, the ending is suitably bleak, and was apparently bleaker in an alternative ending, in which Fran and Peter actually do commit suicide. All in all, I really enjoyed these classics, and their legacy is still evident in today's media and popular culture. Here's to hearing more Strange and Deadly, guys. Welcome back.
Gentlemen, I hope you're well. Christopher Brown here from podcasts of the past and the future. I hope you're enjoying Zombie Month, which for me should be a national holiday. We should all take a month off and enjoy it. Certainly, I am very much so with Nightmare City and Zombie Holocaust, which are entertaining in their own ways, even if those ways are rather silly Italian nonsense from the early 80s. But from them to transition to two proper zombie movies, indeed, what I'd argue is two proper films generally, Night of the Living Dead and Dawn of the Dead. So you think about the favorite thing about Night of the Living Dead, regardless of its great tone and its feel, it's a wonderful film from the time, is that it came, when it came out, people were completely unprepared for that kind of viciousness and horror. It was initially perceived as almost like it's a horror film, so it's a bit schlocky, like I don't know, like a Hammer horror or something like that. So imagine taking your kids to go and see that, and then seeing the little girl stab a mum during the thing. You're looking at them in a different way by the end. And of course, it was a film that it found an audience, as a lot of cult horror does. But I think for Romero, and one of the reasons why it did so well was this kind of concept of being discovered in a different way. So, from a film criticism point of view, in truth. So, in France, it was seen as very much, looking at America at the time and how America functioned and the issues that it faced. Dawn of the Dead kind of takes on board, I think, some of those kind of ideas that, Romero was actually, even if it was just accidentally at the time, criticising or thinking about American society. And he takes that on board and does something very interesting. These days, it appears as being quite clunky with the shopping mall and, the zombies inside. But at the time, shopping malls were relatively reasonably new occurrence, so they didn't seem quite so alien to their audiences now in terms of, well, not alien, but kind of something that was... It felt new and different and that kind of thing. And Romero really pushed this idea that, of the consumerism line, which, granted now looks really ham-fisted, but at the time I don't think it did. I think Romero sometimes does stuff and he kind of gets criticised at the time, or it looks a bit weird afterwards, but at the time, he has got a thought behind it. I mean, Diary of the Dead is an imperfect film, I think it's fair to say, but its criticisms of blogging, of YouTube culture, came well before YouTube is what it is now. I remember a criticism being, no one would, film this and soundtrack it if it was real. I don't think that's true anymore. I think that would happen with people would do that, and you'd have vines of zombie bites and all that kind of stuff. And I think Romero, I wouldn't say he was ahead of his time, but I think he understood the thought processes. Anyway, chaps, I hope you're enjoying this run of films. Some great stuff to come. I love the fact that you're finishing on Argento as well. One of the best films ever made. Two of the best films ever made, actually. Until then, and speak soon. Take care. Goodbye.
Now, this email we actually received before our last episode, but unfortunately it seemed to fall through the cracks for some reason. I can't remember why, but it's good feedback, so let's read it now. It's from our friend Kristen, and she says, "Hey guys, it's Kristen, aka Kiki Writes on Twitter. I know it's been a while since I've inflicted my thoughts upon you, but I feel my feedback is best when it's infrequent. I watched both Nightmare City and Zombie Holocaust and couldn't help but notice a few similarities between the two, outside of the zombie theme. Both films seemed dedicated to their practical gore effects, but were less enthusiastic about constructing decent human replicas for their high falls. Nightmare City had a severed boob and a prolonged eye gouging, but stapled a wig onto a ragdoll to chuck from a helicopter. Zombie Holocaust also had an eye gouging, a lot of intestine eating, and realistic carving torsos complete with lifelike nipples, but tossed a shot mannequin off a building. The arm of it even popped off when it landed."
I told you that at the time when we were reviewing it. It was quite funny.
Yeah, for movies showing some really gruesome acts, some people were really calm about it. The lead character in Nightmare City, I can't remember his name, the skinny Peter Jackson looking guy, watches as a bunch of soldiers are savaged like it's mildly interesting. A maggot-covered head in a bed only warrants an audible gasp from the leading lady in Zombie Holocaust. Also, a nurse walks through a huge puddle of blood to check on a patient, like she walks through random puddles of blood all the time because the janitor is really crap at his job. Each movie also has that one selfish character that gets it. In Zombie Holocaust, that photojournalist is all about getting his story and ends up getting scalped. In Nightmare City, the general's daughter is committed to a weekend trip, zombie apocalypse be damned, and ends up getting eaten by one of her friends. Despite those similarities between the two films, I admit that I liked Zombie Holocaust better than Nightmare City. Sure, every doctor, not just the mad one, in Zombie Holocaust was garbage. Done with the anatomy lesson, just flip the sheet over this gaping abdominal opening. It's fine. And there were more cannibals than zombies, but I found the movie far more entertaining overall. Nightmare City just felt like a slog to me, despite the numerous zombie attack scenes. Peter Jackson Light spends half the movie looking for his wife, who's been trying to avoid him, and then when he finds her, oh, there's still more movie left. And then the ending repeats the beginning, and I thought I was doomed to watch it all over again. Zombie Holocaust was a fun watch that didn't feel like work. As always, guys, I love the show, and I look forward to listening to your commentary on the films. Kristen. Well, thank you, Kristen.
Thank you very much. We have two emails here from Blue. It's Outcast Misfit on Twitter. She's a big fan of us thanks to the Ancient Slumber podcast, and is a big fan of them for some reason. She says she sent us two emails here, one from before we went away and then had our big break rather, and then one very recently for this show. She says, "Hi guys, it's Blue here at Outcast Misfit from Twitter. As you know, I'm relatively new to Strange and Deadly thanks to Mr. Chris Ward." Old Ward, repping us. That's nice of him, isn't it? And I've been binge listening for a couple of weeks now. I finally caught up and just wanted to say I've thoroughly enjoyed each and every podcast. You're entertaining, informative, and downright hilarious. If anything makes me want more, it's Chris's smutty sense of humour. Well, thank you, Blue. I appreciate that. If I was to send in feedback for everything I've heard, we would be here all month, and no one wants a month's worth of my ramblings. So keep up the good work, guys, and I hope to contribute feedback in the future. Best wishes, Blue. That's the first email. Like I said, she sent that before we took our break. Here's the latest one that she sent just the other day. She says, "Hi guys, Blue here from Twitter. It's so good to hear that you're doing a new episode of the Strange and Deadly Show. I'm sure I speak for all of your listeners when I say that you have been missed, and not just Tom's dulcet tones, but yours as well, Chris." Hey, look at that, Tom. Somebody's complimenting me. Okay, before I swoon dramatically, I managed to recap on your choice of films. Now, I'm not the world's greatest zombie film lover, and as such, I haven't seen Night of the Living Dead or Dawn of the Dead in a very long time. I was expecting to say that I hated them, but in actual fact, I really rather enjoyed them. From the 1960s black and white, in my opinion, Hitchcock feel, a superb Night of the Living Dead, to the blue shouting at the TV, just bite him, 1970s offering Dawn of the Dead. I laughed most of the way through its cheesy 70s vibe. I thoroughly enjoyed it and cheered every time a zombie joined in the all-you-could-eat buffet with the biker gang. So all in all, I'm now a zombie convert. I won't take up any more of your time. Good to have you back though. Take care, guys, and best wishes to you both, Blue. Well, thank you very much, Blue. It's really glad to know that you enjoy the show and you enjoy my fantastic sense of humour. Lovely to have a compliment now and again from somebody, because it's dry down here, Blue, it's dry. And I'm not just talking about my groin. Oh dear. Right, move on.
Our old friend Vip sent us an email and he said, "Hi Chris and Tom, I've been catching up missed episodes in my spare moments away from work / college and continuing to plan my October 31st wedding." Oh, we missed it.
Sorry about that. But many happy nuptials to you, sir.
Yes, we hope it was a good one. When, to my surprise, whilst riding the train, my phone jumped out of my pocket, the earphone jack disconnected, and the train was treated to a full volume conversation from the Dawn of the Mummy episode of you, Chris, talking about being a sweaty bollock and describing Tom's oily perfect statue body and its arousal factor, as I scrambled to the floor to retrieve my phone from under a table chair with some very amused looking Americans sitting at it. They didn't ask for the name of the podcast, but I felt compelled to tell them at any rate. Let's hope they're listening. And if you are listening, hello, welcome.
Absolutely, and that's what I live for, to embarrass the listeners. So I've had an achievement, which I'm quite happy about.
So with that, I wanted to thank you for the show and then quickly tell you about how much I adore Dawn of the Dead. I tuned into the film a long time ago on Channel 2, back in the days when your TV set-top box came from Diamond Cable. I remember relishing in all the film had to offer. To this day, I still very much adore it. Now I have a strange obsession with tracking down every kind of Dawn of the Dead VHS cover, DVD cover, board games, figurines, you name it, and I want it. So I hope you guys don't turn out to be Dawn haters. I don't understand folks who hate Dawn of the Dead. How could anyone hate this film? It's got it all. As for Night of the Living Dead, I loved it when I first saw it and can still enjoy the film. But apart from some seminal acting from Dwayne Jones, I don't mind leaving that version and enjoying Tom Savini's film, which feels less of a chore on the ears and eyes. I can kind of see where you're coming from there, old Vip. So Vip goes on to say, "Right, I'm off. Thank you for the podcast. You're welcome. Keep up the great work. And to answer your question in regards to my Twitter feed name, Vip was the name of a Vipco podcast I planned years ago that failed very much in the same way that Vipco did. And 1990 is my partner's date of birth, which makes her 26. I needed a username a while back, and that's what I got off the top of my head. Have a great day, guys, and I look forward to hearing more from you both." Well, thank you, Vip. And it's a shame you never got that podcast off the ground, but, you know, there's always the future. You never know.
Yeah, Tom and I have spoken about Vipco in the past, and we know it quite well. And imagine being born in 1990, Tom. Imagine being that young. Wouldn't it be nice to be that young again?
Yeah.
Hello boys, Chris Ward here from the Ancient Slumber podcast. Just thought I'd chime in with my tuppence worth on possibly the two best films that you'll be covering in your shows. Obviously, Tom said it the last show, Night of the Living Dead and Dawn of the Dead, there's not a lot else we can say about these films that hasn't been said already. But, you know, I think it's always important to go back every so often and have a look at some of the genre standards, as it were. Night of the Living Dead is obviously the classic zombie film. I've always considered it the beginning of modern horror, really. It's still an effective film. It looks a bit creaky nowadays, obviously, but it does have one of the best trailers ever. I just love that guy's voice, and goes, "Night of the Living Dead." It's fucking brilliant. They don't make trailers like that anymore. I seem to remember sending some correspondence into the Gentleman's Grindhouse show many years ago, saying that the Millennium Edition DVD was, at the time, the best edition you could get. I still think that's true, actually, on DVD. It's the one that's approved by George Romero. It's a nice, clean picture. It is the full uncut version. There is a UK edition, which comes with a black cover, which has got the silhouette of the zombie girl's face on it, which you can get really, really cheap. It's got nice special features on it. Probably the best looking print, but be warned, it is cut. There are some very cut versions out there, because Night of the Living Dead is a film that has not been treated well over the years, as you probably know, because it's included on every single box set that's ever been released. It's also worth noting as well that recently George Romero has announced that he found a missing reel of film from Night of the Living Dead, so get ready to put your hands in your pockets once more and shell out for it once again. But nevertheless, it is still a great film. I highly recommend it, obviously. Dawn of the Dead, I think, is perhaps the ultimate zombie film. I think story-wise, it's the strongest because, you know, in the event of an outbreak, what would you do? You would go and hole up somewhere where you've got sort of supplies that are going to see you out for a while. Is it the best zombie film ever? I don't know. I don't think time's been too kind to some of those special effects. I mean, the blue-faced zombies were done out of necessity because there were too many extras for Savini to make up in any quick amount of time. But, you know, I think that's where Day of the Dead tops it for me, is probably the best of the trilogy. But you're not covering Day of the Dead. I also seem to remember Gentleman's Grindhouse did a Romero trilogy special where we could all chime in with our favourites then. I'll be honest, my favourite of the Romero Dead trilogy does change quite regularly depending on my mood. I think they've all been my favourite at one point. If you ask me now, today, it's Day. I think it's the best looking zombie film ever. But, you know, story-wise, you can't top Dawn of the Dead. You know, if you can get hold of any of the decent Blu-ray prints from Arrow, which do go for quite a bit of money now, I do advise it. There's also a brilliant Ultimate Edition Region 1 DVD box set, which is a 4-disc set with all 3 cuts of the film, plus a disc of extras, which is well worth getting your grubby little mitts on. So yeah, I'm not going to say too much about the actual films themselves because, you know, we've all seen them a million times and we'll continue to keep watching them until we're dead ourselves. So with that, I shall chime out. I'm just about to hit 4 minutes. I might go slightly over just to piss you off a little bit, Chris. Not really. Okay, cheers. Bye!
Hi there, Gorblimey here from the Trilogy of Terror podcast. So pleased to hear the Strange and Deadly show is back. I've missed you guys. There's been a big hole in my podcast listening, and I'm glad to know you'll be filling it for me. So, Night of the Living Dead and Dawn of the Dead. Wow. There can't be many movies that have had such a massive impact on horror filmmaking, spilling over into popular culture and television. And all the more impressive, they were directed by the same person. And one of them was his feature film debut. To be honest, it's hard to know what to say about them. They're such icons of horror cinema that they've been discussed and analysed to death, or undeath, or whatever. So I'm just adding a few personal thoughts and a few observations about alternative versions. Mostly about Night of the Living Dead, because that's the one I've seen more recently. The first time I saw it, I was really impressed. It's actually quite shocking. I mean, it's got corpses, cannibalism, matricide, entrails, and even a bit of zombie nudity if you're quick on the pause button. All this in a low-budget black and white movie from the 60s. And of course, there's that big surprise at the downbeat ending as well. It's really well done visually, with loads of Dutch angles and interesting camera work and very creative use of lighting. The only things I've never been too keen on are the characters of Barbara and Johnny. Johnny's incredibly annoying and moany, and thankfully turns into a non-speaking zombie. Barbara, on the other hand, seems to turn into a damp tea towel. I know she's meant to be traumatised and in shock, and it might be realistic, but there's something about that performance that, I don't know. There are many tinkered-with versions of the film knocking around, including 3 different colorised ones, as well as a conversion to 3D. I have no idea why anyone thought those changes would enhance it. Worse than that, I did start watching the 30th anniversary edition once by mistake. It came in a DVD box set along with Dawn of the Dead and Day of the Dead. I'd assumed it would just be a cleaned up version, but 10 minutes later, I'd turned it off. Pointless additional scenes, other scenes edited out, unnecessary new characters, and a completely different score that just doesn't work as well as the original. So I'd say if anyone's thinking of going out and buying this on DVD, check the cover to see which version you've got. There was a remake in 2006, shot fully in 3D and starring Sig Haig. The real one, that is, not the one on the Ancient Slumber podcast. And there was an animated version called Night of the Living Dead Darkest Dawn in 2015. But if the IMDb scores are anything to go by, I don't think we need to say too much about those. The most successful remake was the Tom Savini one from 1990. Dawn of the Dead was also redone by Zack Snyder in 2004. I might be alone in saying this, but I think they're rare examples of modern remakes that are actually pretty good. They aren't groundbreaking or massively influential like the originals were, but I think they're fun popcorn movies and I really enjoy them. Anyway, I'm looking forward to hearing what you guys have to say about the Romero movies, and as I said before, it's good to have you back in my ears again.
Well, welcome back, gentlemen. It's great to have you back on the air once more. And I can't wait to hear what you have to say about two of my favourite movies. And what a pair they are. I don't think there are too many films, or books for that matter, that completely rewrite a monster's mythology the way Night of the Living Dead does. Yes, I know there was Matheson's I Am Legend, and in particular that Italian movie version starring Vincent Price that did lend a hand towards Romero's aims, but really, you've got to give the old boy credit for producing a truly seminal, indeed a truly earth-shifting, genre-breaking, low-budget classic. However, what I always find interesting is that while Night of the Living Dead was to be this huge lodestone flipping the polarities of the zombie genre, it didn't really kick in until Dawn hit the screen, and then suddenly we're unleashing all manner of gut munchers all across the world. I know both movies have their limitations. They don't feature, well, the best performances in every case, and yes, they are rough around the edges, but it's just the sheer power and uncompromising nature of Romero's vision and his social satire that really gives these films a punch that I don't think the years really diminish. Yes, there have been better made and slicker zombie movies, but very few of them have the same bite that these films do, and whenever I go back and watch them, they still prove to be the yardstick against which not only many zombie movies should be judged, but many horror films, full stop. But I'm sure you've said all of this already. So I'll shut me trap and go down and see what's on special offer down in the mall. Great to have you back, chaps.
We have an email from our good friend Amanda Reyes, who recently put out a book, which I enjoyed very, very much indeed. And you should check it out if you haven't. Check out her Twitter account. I'm sure all the info about her book is there. She says, "Hello, Chris and Tom. I remember when you did your Friday the 13th episode, you both wondered what you could say that hadn't already been said about some classic films. Although I think you must know you both did an admirable job adding to the conversation. Now that I'm leaving feedback fairly consistently and you're hitting two major classics, I find myself wondering the same thing. I love both Night and Dawn of the Dead. They are excellent films that have transcended their genres and can be viewed multiple ways. I guess the major thing is that I appreciate Romero recognising black actors and putting them in smart, leading roles amongst a primarily white cast, whether intentional or otherwise. Yet the progressiveness of his politics never overshadows the real suspense and dread he creates. I know he can be hit and miss, and when he misses, oof, it hurts, but he's done enough really good work that I'm always curious about whatever he is working on. Romero is a master and a filmmaker I greatly admire. Also, I lived in Pittsburgh for 3 years and hung out at the Monroeville Mall where Dawn was shot, and even got to play a zombie in my friend's short film, which was shot nearby. It was pretty awesome. It's hard not to have Romero fever when you were there. He's a local hero. That said, I thought it might be fun if I just threw a few questions out to you. The feedback section is a really great way for the listeners to interact with you and get to know you better. And so I thought it might be fun to move a little outside the movies themselves. It's like an episode of This Is Your Life with zombies, sorta. I'll just pipe in here to say, this is actually something that we've always wanted was, if you guys don't feel like discussing the movies or you want to throw in a couple of questions for us, you're very welcome to do so. You can even do it on Twitter. Do so. Send us some questions and we'll be happy to answer them. You don't always have to just discuss the movies. Anyway, she says here, you will probably discuss this in the review portion, but I'm curious what you think of the remakes of the films you are covering. I love them both. Well, let's tackle that now. I mean, we kind of did that, didn't we, really? But,
yeah.
I mean, we've just done it with Night, and I don't know if we spoke that much about the Dawn of the Dead remake, if at all, actually.
No, we didn't.
No, we didn't. I'm a big fan of it. I'm not a huge fan of remakes in general. There are a few that I think, if you're asking me to list a couple, I think the Maniac remake was done really well, and that's a film that you and I, Tom, is very close to our blackened hearts. Mm-hmm. But what did you think of that one?
Oh, I loved it. Yeah,
I thought it was done really well and different to the original, but still had a similar sort of tone. I thought, considering Frodo is in it, I wasn't sure, but I thought it was done very well, and I thought he was very good in it. Really, if you haven't seen the Maniac remake, you've got to get over the fact that Joe Spinell's not in it, because that's what you immediately think of. You think, well, how can you do Maniac without Joe Spinell? But surprisingly, worked very well. Maniac remake I enjoy. I thought the Evil Dead remake was done pretty good, but Dawn of the Dead's probably my favourite horror remake. Very different to the original. It's probably the only Zack Snyder film that I love, and I quite enjoy 300 as well. I mean, what's your take on that remake?
I do like it, but I remember it came out at the same time as Shaun of the Dead, and I used to go to the cinema quite a bit back then, and one night I went to see Shaun of the Dead. The next night I went to see, or maybe a couple of days later, I went to see Dawn of the Dead.
Right.
And Dawn of the Dead just felt quite empty compared to Shaun of the Dead, because there's so much heart in Shaun of the Dead, and it felt like a bit of a shallow experience. But there's nothing wrong with a shallow experience sometimes, and on subsequent watches I kind of warmed to it a bit, as it's a zombie action movie, and that's fine if that's all you want. So yeah, I do like it.
Yeah, I mean, Shaun of the Dead is a classic, I would say. And, Dawn of the Dead, the remake. I mean, Zack Snyder doesn't make emotional films to begin with anyway, so seeing depth is not really there. But I thought for a remake, done pretty damn well, and a fun movie to watch. And so we've kind of talked about those, both of those. So Amanda continues here. Another question that always arises when zombie talk pops up is, which do you prefer, the fast or slow zombies? For me, it's the slow zombies. I think I understand the appeal of the fast zombie. I mean, I remember there was a debate that was raging when the Dawn of the Dead remake came out about, is this as scary? Why can they run? Surely rotting would have set in. So how are they able to run at all? How would they have the strength to do it? All of those questions came in. It didn't really affect my enjoyment of that film too much. But for some reason, there's something about the slow zombie that works for me. It's classic. It's iconic. And I like the idea of, you imagine the slow zombie to be quite easy to escape from, but they overwhelm you, don't they? There's the horde of them, there's a group of them, and somehow they manage to overwhelm you. For me, it's always been the slow zombie.
Yeah, same here. Lock someone in a room with a fast zombie, they're dead in seconds. Lock them in a room with a slow zombie, they'll fight them off for a while, but eventually that slow zombie's going to get them. So, yeah, slow zombies for me too. But, I enjoy them both.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at 28 Days Later, for example, even though they don't call them zombies in that, effectively they are, and, that's effective as well. The idea of something undead chasing you really, really fast is scary, but for me, I prefer the classic monster. She continues, outside of these two films, what would be your favourite zombie movie? Why don't you go first on this one, Tom?
I mean, we've already mentioned Day of the Dead, so it could be that. Would The Beyond be a zombie movie? I don't think it is. Some people say it is because it's got zombies in it, but if it is, then it's The Beyond. If it's not, then I don't know, maybe Zombie Flesh Eaters or Shaun of the Dead.
Oh, Tom, you put The Beyond into the conversation, and I wasn't expecting it. I do love The Beyond greatly. I would have to say, it's I suppose it's between the original Dawn, Shaun of the Dead, and Zombie Flesh Eaters, aka Zombie 2, Lucio Fulci's Zombie. Definitely one of those, I would say. I love the look of the zombies in Zombie Flesh Eaters. They really look like they've come from the earth. And they've dug themselves out from the grave, and I've always enjoyed that look. So yeah, probably one of those. She continues here with the final question: what is your favourite subgenre of horror? And let you go first on this one again, Tom.
That's a tough one. I mean, at times in my life, I probably would have said zombies because there's even things like Return of the Living Dead that I love so much.
Yeah.
You know what? I'm going to have to think on that one. I really can't say off the top of my head, so maybe I'll get back to you on that one, Amanda.
Okay, in a future episode, it'll be about 7 or 8 months, so you've got plenty of opportunity to think about it. I would have to say it goes somewhere between slashers and gialli, because I've watched a lot of gialli over the years. The Italian giallo is a favourite of mine. A lot of them are very slow. A lot of them are pretty nonsensical. But there's something about them that I enjoy. I enjoy the mystery of them. There's always a murder mystery, and I'm always curious to know who it is at the end, even if it's absolutely ludicrous. So there is that. But I watched a lot of slashers when I was growing up, and I still have to say, if I want to have a fun time, I'll whack on, New Year's Eve, or I'll whack on Friday the 13th, part 4 or part 3, part 6. So I suppose if I had to narrow it down, it would probably be the slasher. But I'm a big fan of Italian horror in general. So I would have to say something between the two of those. And I love zombie movies as well, but I've seen so many of them. But like you say, Tom, there are some real standouts in that. It's hard to nail it down, isn't it? Really, but I suppose if I was pressed to do so, I would pick slasher. Okay, so thanks very much for the questions, Amanda. That was really cool. That was really fun. And if any of you other guys want to do that at some point, throw in some questions for us instead of talking about the films, or just discussing the films and then throwing them in afterwards. We'd love to answer them for you. So she finishes off the email here. By the way, I re-listened to the astrologer episode, and I want so badly to make Tom's impression of the lead actress my ringtone. There has to be a way to make it so. Well, it's quite easy to do. I think you can get apps on your phone where you can chop out a piece of audio and set it as your ringtone. I wouldn't do it if I were you, though, Amanda. You don't need that. You don't need this man's voice in your ear 24 hours a day. That is all. Hope you are well, Amanda. Thank you very much, Amanda. We always love to hear from you. And I don't remember what Tom's impressions of the lead actress were, to be honest, because I've tried to put that movie out of my head. Do you remember, Tom?
I do, yeah. I will. Maybe I'll record you a little special one there, Amanda. Our friend Rob Walker sent us an email, and he said, "Gentlemen, I wanted to write in and tell you what a fan I am of the Strange and Deadly show, as well as all of the Gentleman's Grindhouse programming. The show is crisp and well edited. The music is beautiful, thanks to Danny Davis for that, and fits the subject matter perfectly, and Dark Ink One's cover art is brilliant. Amen to that as well. You both have fantastic chemistry and do your best to review these films seriously, giving them a fair shot. I enjoy your dissections of how sleazy cinema can succeed in being entertaining or have something more to say. However, it is also fun to listen to you describe a film that's complete shit and talk about why it fails." Yeah, there's a lot of that on this podcast.
There is. You know what, Tom? We're fucking brilliant, aren't we?
Aside from insightful criticism, I can't get enough of the jokes and impressions, whether it's hearing Chris detail his wiping rituals, oh dear, or Tom's spot on James Mason. You guys never fail to bring a smile to my face. I'm sorry to say that with my current schedule, sitting down to watch a complete movie has been a bit difficult. So I've not seen Nightmare City or Zombie Holocaust. I'll likely have more to contribute when it comes to the Romero films. However, I do have questions for both of you. What movie do you enjoy that no one else seems to? And what movie do you recommend to people to get them started in the horror genre? Thanks a lot, guys. Keep up the excellent work. Rob Walker. Well, thank you, Rob. Okay, so a movie you enjoy that no one else seems to, Chris?
Well, he's not... Is he asking a horror movie specifically? He doesn't put it there. Maybe. I mean...
Well, I don't know.
I'm trying to think...
What springs to mind?
I don't know. I mean, I suppose if we're talking horror movies, I've got a bit of a fondness, even though it's not very good. I've got a bit of a fondness for Halloween Part 5, which is yeah, I know, and it's because I enjoyed it when I was a kid, and I think that stuck with me. It is bad. No, don't get me wrong. It is bad. I know that it's bad, but I do get a bit of enjoyment from that. I suppose I'm trying to think. I mean, outside of horror. Now, I know that plenty of people like this, but it seems like apart from my girlfriend, nobody else other than her that I've met seems to like these movies. But I really enjoy the Hellboy movies, and it seems like there's not a lot of widespread love for it. Now, of course, there are plenty of people who really enjoy the character and enjoy the movies, but for some reason, I just never seem to meet them at all. So Hellboy 1 and especially Hellboy 2 is a beautifully crafted movie, and neither movie did particularly brilliantly at the box office. But those are always movies that I go back to every year, really, and I really enjoy them. I think they're really good, solid comic book movies, and I mean, I love my comic book movies anyway, but those are two that stand out for me on a mainstream level. So, I mean, you sort of go ahead and answer, Tom, and I'll try and see if I can think of any other horror-related ones.
Okay, well, mine is quite a really derided movie. I don't think I've ever spoke to someone else who likes it.
Okay.
And I'll quantify this by saying when I say I like it, I'm not saying it's in any way good. It's rubbish in every way, but I just get a kick out of it. And that is Uwe Boll's House of the Dead.
Oh, no, Tom.
It's ridiculous. It's stupid, but it's fun. And you only need to watch House of the Dead 2, which wasn't directed by Uwe Boll, to see how fun the first one is. But, like I said, I don't think I've ever met anyone else who thinks the same. But and I don't think I've met anyone today who thinks the same from your reaction.
I'll tell you what then, Tom. I'll join you, not in House of the Dead, but I will join you with an Uwe Boll movie.
Go on.
I've only seen it. I think I've seen it 1.5 times, and the other half I might have fallen asleep to it, or I might just have given up on it. But I quite enjoy Uwe Boll's adaptation of Blood Rain. I don't know if you've ever seen that, but Blood Rain was a pretty cool video game back in the day. They made a couple of them, and he did of course, for a while he was doing video game adaptations. House of the Dead is video game adaptation. And he did Far Cry. He did a bunch of them, and he did Blood Rain, and it starred what was her name? Christina. She played the Terminator in Terminator 3. Do you remember her name? Christina Loken, I think.
Yeah,
Loken. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And she played the titular character. And it is dreadful, but it's so hammy and cheesy that I enjoyed it quite a bit, So I would have to say, I'll join you in that to make you feel less bad about it. House of the Dead, I can't forgive you for that, but mind you, having said that, Blood Rain's not any better, so who am I to judge? I can't really think of any other horror ones specifically that really stand out for me. I mean, the first Resident Evil film's all right, isn't it? And that's derided, isn't it? I think as a series, that's okay. It's not. I remember at the time thinking, well, this is nothing like the video games at all. And then the video games ended up becoming, apart from the latest one, which is like a reboot, they ended up becoming much like the film series. So, go figure. But I hope we answered that for you, Rob. Was there any other question he had in there?
Yeah. The second part. Well, before that, I mean, we always threatened to do something on the Gentleman's Grindhouse radio podcast feed that I never do anything on. I reckon an Uwe Boll double bill one day might just be the ticket.
Okay.
The second part of Rob's question was, what movie do you recommend to people to get them started in the genre? Ooh, that's a tough one. Do you want to go first on that one, mate?
Yeah, I mean, you should try and think about something that's kind of accessible, really. And for me, where it began for me really as a kid, I shouldn't have been watching it really. My parents let me watch it, and I've told this story before. They would always make me put a cushion over my face whenever something violent happened, and that was John Carpenter's Halloween. I think it's I think it's a very accessible movie. I mean, something like Halloween, Nightmare Before Christmas, Nightmare on Elm Street. Nightmare Before Christmas is pretty great, but it's not a horror movie. Nightmare on Elm Street, I would say. Oh God, let me think. Maybe one of the Friday the 13th movies is a good place to start. You want something that's peppy, and you want something that is popcornish, I would say, as a movie. I mean, what can you think of?
It's a difficult one, that, because it depends on who they are, how, what level of film, because some people are very casual about their movies, aren't they? Not everyone is like us, and they go on the internet and read other people's thoughts on them and this, that, and the other. Because I find that people who go online and write or podcast about movies a lot of the time, who like horror but aren't majorly horror fans as such, sometimes have quite a bit of a snobbish attitude to certain aspects of horror. And I mean, I've heard it on podcasts recently where people say, oh yeah, those gore movies, those gore movies are shit. And it's like, that's not scary. And I just think, well, gore's not meant to be scary. This genre, like any other genre, has different aspects to it. And I don't mind someone saying they don't particularly care for gore, or it's not their preference within the genre, but you can't just dismiss it wholesale because it's not what you're into, because different types of horror push different buttons, and that's what's great about it. And but it's not usually the hardcore horror fans who say that kind of thing. It's those people who are just on the edge. So you have to kind of take all these things into account. So with that in mind, something like Evil Dead 2, if they don't mind a bit of 80s stuff, something like that might be a good way in, because it is gory, but it's lighthearted and it's fun and that kind of thing as well. So yeah,
Evil Dead 2 is a really good shout. If you want to sort of bring them in with something modern, maybe something funny like Shaun of the Dead, Tucker and Dale versus Evil. I don't know if you've seen that. Really funny horror comedy that is totally plays with the conventions of horror. Maybe something like Cabin in the Woods. If you're going back to the 80s, we've given you a bunch of examples there. Perhaps something, I'm trying to think, even something cheesy like Witchboard, something like that. That's very accessible and entertaining. I think you want to keep it, like I said, you want to keep it try and keep it peppy. Maybe something like, I don't know, The Burning or so. I don't know. I would say that really what you want to do is go in with some of the most popular horror movies, the ones that are considered the classics. That's kind of where you want to start. And for me, it's always something like Nightmare on Elm Street or Halloween. Watch the originals. And I think that's a very good way to introduce them to an older kind of horror that still has some teeth to it. Okay, well, thanks so much, Rob. That was really lovely feedback and really lovely to hear from you. And yeah, another email where we got some different questions, which was really nice. We'd love to have some more of that. But thank you so much, Rob. And we know you're super busy at the moment, being more famous and popular than us, mate, being more creative and more interesting than we could ever be. So the fact that you're sitting and enjoying this is a real pleasure and a real honour for us. So thank you very much.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
And that's the end of our feedback section. We had a lot to get through there, but then we had to carry over some emails and some pieces of audio from before we stopped recording for many months. So we'd like to thank our audio feedbackers, Chris Brown, Chris Ward, Gore Blimey, Andrew Roberts and Jim Moon. Thank you so much for your feedback. We really enjoyed listening to those, and we hope you guys listening enjoyed them too. So that is going to be the end of our show. Before we go, let's tell you how you can get in touch with us. You can email us if you've got any feedback you'd like to join our wonderful feedbackers here. You can do so by emailing a piece of audio. Try and make it no longer than 4 minutes. Email that, or you can just send an email to feedback@strangeanddeadly.com. And if you'd like to get in touch with us on social media, you can do so. Tom, where can they find you?
Grindhouse Tom on Twitter.
Yeah, and you can find me. I'm back on Twitter a little bit since last we spoke. I decided to come back and really to try and promote the show and to try and be less of a grumpy bastard. So I am there. You can find me on Twitter at the Chris Clayton, and you can also find me on Instagram, the Chris Clayton, and under the same name on Letterboxd. And yeah, also, if you get an opportunity, it really helps us to leave us an iTunes review and rating. You can do so. It's very, very easy to do. It doesn't take you, it just takes you a couple of minutes at the most. And ratings and reviews really help our show to become more visible. So if you get a chance to do it, that would be wonderful for you to do so. And that's going to be the end of our show. Now, Tom, what have we got coming up on episode 31 of The Strange and Deadly Show?
Yeah, this one is a bit of a... When we sorted all the films on the Sections 3 list out, there was these two kind of left, and we were going to do them as single episodes, but we thought, why not just put them together? I think there might be a bit of a revenge aspect to them, but I don't think we really know until we watch them. I mean, one of them is a great favourite of yours, so you will know, but the other one is quite a low-key movie that you just don't hear about, and the first one is called The Chant of Jimmy Blacksmith, which is an Australian film, I believe, and it might be quite unique on the Section 3 list because I think it's quite a serious film with a serious message, racism and so on, so that'll be something a bit different. And then the next one is Shogun Assassin.
Yeah, and what Tom was referring to there was I'm a big fan of Shogun Assassin, specifically the film series and indeed the manga series that Shogun Assassin is based on and is in fact comprised of. And you may wonder, what do you mean by that, Chris? What do you mean? Are you telling me that Shogun Assassin isn't a standalone movie, that it's comprised of something else? Well, yes, it is. So that's going to be a bit of a labour of love for me when we come on to the next episode, is dissecting that. But also... The Chant of Jimmy Blacksmith I'd never heard of before. I've never seen it before. And so that's going to be interesting. That's why we couldn't label it as a revenge theme, because I don't really know anything about it. So we thought it's a random theme for the next episode. We're sticking the two films together. One I know incredibly well, one I don't. And both of these films you've not seen, Tom.
I haven't, no. I mean, I think I might have seen something that Shogun Assassin came from, but to be honest... I'm pretty much going into this one blind.
Okay, well, you're going to get every piece of info you could possibly want to know about Shogun Assassin next week, and we're going to explore the Chant of Jimmy Blacksmith together. It's on The Strange and Deadly Show, episode 31. Listen out for that. It won't be 6 months away. I can promise you that, and we look forward to recording it. And the final thing that I have to say is make sure you continue listening to this episode after the end credits are finished. That we don't normally. Yeah, you're right to make that noise, Tom. We normally we don't put bloopers at the end just to keep the shows a bit leaner, but there's going to be a very long one at the end of this because, look, I'm not going to spoil it for you. All I can tell you is that you are going to listen to the sound of a Liverpudlian man losing his mind. And it's a wonderful thing to bear witness to. So thank you for listening. We really, really appreciate your support, and we will catch you on the next episode of The Strange and Deadly Show. I've been Chris Clayton.
And I'm Tom Elliott.
And we'll catch you on the next one. Bye for now. Bye.
Bye.
You've been listening to The Strange and Deadly Show, brought to you by Gentleman's Grindhouse Records, with me, Chris Clayton, and Tom Elliott. Thank you to Danny Davis for the music and to Dark Ink 1 for the artwork. You can visit our website at gentlemansgrindhouserecords.com. That is the end of Night of the Living Dead, Tom. Now, it's time for you to speak and to tell us about the second film in our double bill. What is it?
Okay, Dawn of the Dead, released in 1978, also known as Zombie, of course directed by George Romero, starring Galen Ross, Ken Foray, Scott H. Renegade and David M.G. among others.
MG. Is it MG or MG? I don't know. Sorry, mate. I didn't mean to throw
I'll
you
start
off
the
there.
names again. Starring Galen Ross, Ken Foray, Scott H. Renegade and David M.G. among others. There's chaos at WGON TV station where reporter Francine is trying to make sense of the world's events. The country is now flooded with the undead, reanimated people who have come back to life. Although the government is trying to suppress the threat, there are now simply too many to deal with. A televised debate is raging about how to deal with these zombies.
I'll get some water while you're reading that then, mate.
Yeah.
Because it'll take you a while to get through it, and I'll get some water and I'll come right
Gonna
back.
have a dump as well.
Okay, all right. Normally I just do it sitting in the chair. All right. I wish we were still doing the bloopers so I could include that. Go and have a dump as well. All right, carry on. I'll be right.
Okay. A televised... I love you, Chris. I've wanted to tell you for so long, but I love you. I love your cheeky little face, you little southern fuckhole. A televised debate is raging about how to deal with these zombies, what they want and what to do with the bodies once the brain has been destroyed. Francine's boyfriend and fellow reporter Stephen, realizing that the situation is desperate, comes to Francine with a plan in mind. Tonight they'll escape in Stephen's helicopter along with Roger, Stephen's SWAT team friend. Along with Roger, Stephen's SWAT team friend, and the search for a safer location in which to reside. Meanwhile, Roger is about to raid an apartment building with his teammates, which has been overrun with the dead, but also vigilante residents who don't want the SWAT team to come in. Okay, right about now, I'm going to just read you the script to Dawn of the Dead, because this fucking synopsis is about 4 pages long.
Hello there. Did you mean for me to hear that?
No, I wanted you to discover it. Hold on, I lost my place. A fight ensues and some of the SWAT members die as Roger makes his way in. It's a scene of death and destruction inside, with the living dead occupying some of the rooms. One of Roger's teammates commits suicide, unable to deal with the pressure of the overwhelming odds stacked against him. Roger runs off to a nearby laundry room to get some air.
Oh dear. Shall I make the synopsis short again next time?
No, it's okay. Roger runs off to, it's just he ran to the laundry room to get some air. That's all. Hold on.
You can change it if you want.
Sorry. Oh, we always do this. Hold on.
Yeah. You do. I'm professional.
Fucking hell. Roger runs off. No. This is going to be a terrible edit for you, mate, especially with all the feedback. With all this feedback,
I know.
It's
going to be a long one, isn't it?
Yeah, we won't comment on it. We'll just say this too.
Yeah.
Okay. Roger runs off to a nearby laundry room and encounters Peter, someone from another SWAT unit. The two converse before they're invited into the basement area by a preacher. They discover many zombies in a room, dumped and writhing on the floor. Peter and Roger shoot them all in the head. The duo finally meet up with Francine and Stephen and take off in a helicopter. They land to refuel and encounter resistance from zombies in the area, with Peter being attacked by 2 undead children. He shoots them dead, a look of shock upon his face. Stephen, who comes to gain the nickname Flyboy on account of him being the one to fly the helicopter, proves himself a lousy shot, unable to save Peter. Luckily, Roger steps in to take the undead down, saving the life of his new friend. Having refueled, the group return to the helicopter and eventually happen upon a shopping mall. They enter in through the roof and find that the mall is full of zombies, but reason that there they can prosper here. Hold on. But reason that they can prosper here with the amount of food and supplies available. Stephen seems to disagree with their methods, with clear tension between he and Peter. Regardless, Roger and Peter venture out into the mall to enter one of the shops. Keeping the zombies at bay is difficult due to the sheer... Keeping the zombies at bay is difficult.
This is going to be a bitch to edit, this synopsis. It's my fault. I shouldn't have written it so long. I just did it because I thought it would use up more time in the show.
It's like the audiobook version of it.
I did it because they do it on Now Playing. He
No.
explains the whole plot. No. For the next one, I'll keep it short.
No, I know. It's fine. I couldn't do it, to be honest. I couldn't write these synopses, so, it's cool. Where are we? Stephen seems to... I'll just start from Stephen.
Yeah.
Okay. Stephen seems to disagree with their methods, with clear tension between he and Peter. Regardless, Roger and Peter venture out into the mall to enter one of the shops. Sorry.
I can tell that you're in the verge of laughter through this whole thing.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Stephen. This only ever happens when I'm recording with you. I'm not this
what is setting you up?
Giggly normally in life. Stephen seems to disagree with their methods. I'm sorry, mate. This is going to be so bad to edit.
It's all right. I might chop some of it and put it as a blooper.
Yeah,
I might.
It might be worth putting the bloopers back in for this one.
Yeah.
Stephen seems to disagree with their methods, with clear tension between he and Peter. Regardless, Roger and Peter venture out into the mall to enter one of the shops. Keeping the zombies at bay is difficult due to their sheer number, but the pair manage it. With access to food and drink, the group realise they could be safe here.
What?
I don't know. Hold on.
What is wrong with you, man?
They gather some supplies and listen to the radio. Hang
on, you've got to reread that bit because you started laughing at the end of... You started laughing through that.
Sorry.
You got to go with access to food and drink. Start there.
Okay. With access to food and drink, the group realise they could be safe here. I'm so sorry. Hold on.
This is the longest synopsis we've ever done.
No.
Mind you, they're the longest ones I've ever written, to be fair.
With access to... No. Okay.
All right, professionalism. Come on, we can do this.
With access to food and drink, the group realise they could be safe here. They gather some supplies and listen to the radio, hearing the government reports. During a conversation, Stephen reveals that Francine is 3 or 4 months pregnant. Peter asks if he wants to abort the baby. Hold on. I'll get there. We're nearly there. Come on.
Yeah.
Peter.
There's only 3 or 4 pages left.
Peter asks if he wants to abort the baby, but the idea is... come on. Peter asks if he wants to abort the baby, but the idea is refused. The supply runs continue, with Francine being told to stay behind until she can handle herself. She asks Stephen if he can teach her how to fly the helicopter just in case anything happens to him, which he eventually does. Roger and Peter hatch a plan to keep them... Roger and Peter hatch a plan to keep the number of zombies entering the building much lower by using...
What is wrong with you? I can just hear you starting to crack up underneath it all.
Sorry, hold on.
Sorry, start from Roger and Peter again. We're almost there.
Oh, mate, that's going to be so bad. I'm so sorry.
It's all right. Not to worry.
Roger and Peter hatch a plan to keep the number of zombies entering the building much lower.
I can still hear it. I can hear your voice shaking. You poor bastard. You're right in that mode, aren't you? Where you just you can't help it.
Roger and Peter hatch a plan to keep the number of zombies entering the building much lower by using some trucks outside to form a blockade. The plan works, but Roger is bitten on the arm and leg in the process due to carelessness. He progressively gets sicker over the coming months until he dies, reanimating as an undead. Peter kills him before he can do any harm. Though the group is down by one member, they continue to survive. The emergency TV. You might have to redo the where is it? The group is down by one number. They continue to survive, because you sounded like you had a mouthful of water when you were saying it. Okay.
Sorry, just repeat through the group is down by one member bit.
Though the group is down by one member, they continue to survive. The emergency TV and radio broadcasts eventually stop, seemingly indicating that the country has been largely taken over.
Oh my God.
Nearly down, nearly. Hold on.
You actually gave me that. You gave me hope. This is all going in the bloopers, mate. You're gonna suffer for this.
I'm sorry. I'm so sorry.
If I have to suffer for it, you're gonna suffer for it.
The emergency TV and radio broadcasts eventually stop, seemingly indicating that the country has been largely taken over by the dead, and that no military or government help is available anymore. Things come to a conclusion when a bike... Sorry. Hold on. Things come to a conclusion... You should just put it in its entirety, the whole thing.
I should. Yeah, I'll have to.
It'll take it half an hour to edit that otherwise.
Yeah,
Things come to a conclusion when a biker gang rides into the mall, driving through the doors and allowing zombies to pour in en masse. Peter suggests they leave the bikers to do what they came to do, which is salvage and raid. But Stephen attacks them. A gunfight ensues, and then Stephen, who tries to make an escape in the elevator, is cornered and bitten by zombies. Peter manages to kill some of the bikers, and some are killed by the zombies, forcing the rest to retreat. Hold on. A gunfight ensues, and Stephen, who tries to make an escape in the elevator, is cornered and bitten by zombies. Peter manages to kill some of the bikers, and some are killed by... Hold on, no.
Jesus.
Peter manages to kill some of the bikers, and some are killed by the zombies, forcing the rest to retreat. In reanimated form, Stephen leads the zombies into a secret area upstairs that the group have been living in. Peter realizes that they can no longer stay up here. He tells Francine to leave through the roof and to take the helicopter and go. He wants to stay and die. As Francine fires up the helicopter, Peter has a change of heart and he manages to force his way up into the roof. He enters the helicopter alongside Francine, and the two fly off into an unknown future as the world crumbles around them. In the sequel, Day of the Dead, Bub does...
No, God, don't carry it on. Well done.
I'm sorry. I'm really sorry.
That's all right.
But it'd be worth just putting that in wholesale in the bloopers.
I'm going to do it. Everyone's going to know about you, mate. Don't you worry. I'm sending this to everybody who listens to the Twilight Zone podcast. You listen to that professionalism. This is what it's really like.
Oh, mate, this is going to be so long. I'm so sorry. Okay, let's go.
We have an Amanda from our good friend Amanda Reyes, who put out a book very recently.
Hold on. You just said You just said we have an Amanda from our good friend Amanda.
I'm not putting that in the bloopers because of
Fucking
you.
hell, these are going to be long bloopers.
They are, aren't they?
You got to. It was a good one.
Sorry, Amanda. Sorry.